241. Burning sunflower. Year 244. All right. Shieldpiercer deployed, Alka said with relief, as the portal closed. The magical artifact floated into location, right above the shield around the sun rings. Activating. The shieldpiercer was a ring-shaped object, about the size of a rift gate. It was large, about 3 stories tall, and meant to essentially create a hole within the shield by creating an offsetting magical energy. It was a work of incredible craftsmanship, made by level 100 craftsmen who had to travel to the barrier world to see it made. The shieldpiercer whirled to life, and my void mages grinned. Yep, it works. Ready for our invasion. What's the freaking plan? Lumuf cursed. Go in, deploy Eons seed and conquer. What if the seed doesn't work on the rings? It's not a planet, you know. You can't grow plants on steel. It doesn't look like steel. Stella looked at the rest. Well, I think the 4 of us should go first. If the coast seems clear, then the rest of the team comes in. One of the level 140 Valthorn nodded. Well, cover the base here, if you need a place to retreat. Got it. We don't really know what we are dealing with. Lumuf said. My bet is more demons. Alka laughed. But you know what, the 4 of us can go with minimal risk. All we waste is time. Eon, should we go? Lumuf asked for my opinion. Stella and Alka both advocated going, the prospect of learning something new was worth it. Edna was neutral. Lumuf was the only one feeling a little cautious. I feel like given the size and importance of the sun rings, its defenders are likely more powerful than what we've seen before. Agreed. But we need to do this. We can't figure out how to deal with the demons without some risks. Alka had a point, and I couldn't just wait here. We'll have to risk it. 4 of you go. If it seems clear, then call the rest of the team in to investigate. Lumuf nodded. As you command. The void domain holder weaved her void magic through the shieldpiercer, and then the portal whirled into existence. She frowned. Not very stable, there's some disruptive elements coming from the surface of the sun rings. Possible anti-magic presence. Alka looked around. We go first. The rest stay behind. All right. The 4 moved through the portal, and landed, possibly, as the first mortals on the sun rings. Title awarded. Invaders of the Ring. Snarky system. Stella cursed, as we landed on what was super close to the sun. At this distance, there was a perpetual searing heat that threatened to bake anything that faced the sun. A protective shield emerged above, and even that was cooked. As we looked around, we were pretty much on the inner side of a ring world. On this side, it was just a sheen of gold, the surface was cooked. But we saw some crystalline formation itself, collecting the sun's incredibly intense mana. That heat was laced with mana. I was star mana, yet, it didn't feel like star mana of the heroes. Instead, it felt like a raw form of star mana, untouched by the divine energies of the gods. Very much like those produced by my little star mana producing leaves, but in a slightly different form. Even star mana has variants within them. Stella, I thought the prevailing theory was that suns don't produce star mana. At least, our tests didn't indicate that to be the case. We were unable to replicate the conditions of the comet world, but our tests on Treehome, Mountain World and Three World did not find any star mana from their suns. Clearly that theory was wrong. Stella answered. Some of them still do. Alka countered. Maybe it's just the star's age. Ken once told me that a star goes through a life cycle of growth, and gradual death. This is a sun in its dying days. Like the comet world, it takes the dying moments of the sun to produce it, and this is a really large sun, so has a long time to go from when it starts producing star mana to its dying moments. There was nothing here. Not on the inner side. Let's move to the other side of the ring. Stella said. Bad news is, we'll have to walk. At this distance from the star, I am feeling quite a strong drain on my magic. Fine with me, actually. The walk was uneventful, and for 4 domain holders with all sorts of augmented abilities, they moved quickly. Lumuf's blessings and enchantments meant they moved through the strangely steel and glass-like structure of the sun rings. Then we reached the dark side of the sun rings and were greeted with demons. The demons were slender, and looked quite like those cool demon knights we've seen long ago. They all had swords. Company, Edna said, and her weapons shredded them easily. Here, on the dark side, the weather and temperature took an abrupt turn, turning incredibly cold instead. We also had a better look at the materials beneath us. Crystals and glass, with bits of steel and rock. The unusual magical formations seen on the rift gates were seen here once more, but in different words and different patterns. The demons had their own runic language. One that we didn't understand, though we tried to copy. The defenses were cleared fairly easily. At least, we managed to remove those that we found with not much trouble. Think it's safe to call the rest of the team here? Stella asked. Alka nodded. He squatted and touched the floor. It was beautiful when it wasn't burning hot. Yeah, I want people looking into these glass materials beneath us right now. They are incredible. Edna looked around the cold, dark side of the sun rings. I'll look for somewhere to set up a base. It's likely we won't have any, if this whole place is built for purpose, so we'll have to just set up camp on top of this. That'll have to do, I suppose. Stella nodded as she did her thing, a portal whirled into existence. I am still feeling the mild magical interference, and I think it's coming from beneath us. Ambient interference from the sun. Possible, but you think the glass has some anti-magical qualities? We'll have to look at it. Alka said. Can't say for sure, even with my identification abilities. Lumuf spread out his own senses, and mine. I felt like I was floating in the air, despite the presence of a solid surface. This whole thing was artificial. It wasn't Earth, except certain parts. My senses abhorred most of the surface, but it's likely the sun rings was built by joining asteroids or planetoids together to form an underlying structure. There are parts where I wanted to be. Parts where there was an asteroid still hidden underneath all the glass and crystals. Lumuf repeated our observations, and the rest of the team stepped through. Should we approach the holes? There was a part of the sun rings where the star mana of the sun was pulled and pushed through a set of unusual gigantic holes on the sun rings. That was where the star mana was somehow transformed into void mana. It certainly invalidated the idea that a superdimensional mana could somehow be converted into an anti-dimensional mana. Or at least, there was a way to extra the super part and replace it with anti. Or there was a way these two facts could exist while still being true. Stella shook her head. I think we're not ready. Let's just do some more research. We find out what we can. Then once we're mostly done, we push through to those places. Why? Because of defenders. Alka countered. We could get more research done there. Well, yes, Stella said. If that place is important, it's likely to have stronger defenders. We have a good base of operations here, we ought to just stay here and take what we have. Edna nodded in agreement. Very well, but we will be spending time. Valuable time. Nothing much occurred for the next 2 months, as the demons ignored our small base of operations in that quiet corner of the sun rings. The samples of the sun rings materials was extremely interesting, being made of some kind of fusion of crystals, anti-mana glass and some weird type of steel alloy not found on our worlds. That steel alloy felt like one of those rare minerals only found on selected worlds, a world we clearly need to capture for our own. So, we're ready to go. Alka was excited, as were the rest of the team. We packed up, and we began to journey to what we referred to as the furnace. The journey there was littered with demons, and we slaughtered them as they came. There were no spawning pools here, so we had no idea where they came from. Then after a month of walking through the magically disruptive dark side of the sun rings, we arrived at the furnace. Along the surface of that circular ring that guided the jet of void mana, were strange statues. It was massive. Looking across the furnace was quite like looking at the moon. The distances were probably similar, or more, since this was pretty much a solar-scale superstructure. The circular rings were made with even more unusual materials, and the magical energies here was extremely powerful. The void mana generated and sent into the null-dimensional void barrier and beyond felt like an intense pulsar. A very intense pulsar that even my domain holders couldn't get near. This was akin to approaching the sun itself. We'd be baked alive. For the level 130 and 140 Valthorns, this was a sight they'd probably never forget. If they survived this trip. You know, the idea that the demons are some kind of self-replicating machine are starting to make sense. Alka said. This is the kind of thing I am pretty sure Ken would say to be the work of a robotic creature. Demon golems. Edna shrugged. She spent enough time with Kay and the heroes to be familiar with the terms. Lumuf looked at Stella. Well, from our earlier observation, we know that capturing this structure is impossible. We'd only be able to capture the rock remnants still within certain parts of the sun rings. That only leaves destroying it. Alka said. Can we even destroy something this massive? One of the Valthorns interjected. Well, have to. At that point, we noticed the statues around the circular furnace activated. A distress signal. Stella immediately cursed. Prepare for battle. We have company. The aura we sensed was immediate, as a rift opened right in front of us. A demon king emerged. It was a massive creature the size of a building. It had two glowing axes the size of cars, and armor. Around it were those slender demons, but with more power than before. Demon King, Defender. Arrived on. Now's not a good time to be funny, system. Lumoof cursed. The entire sun ring vibrated, and then a pulse. The glass crystal structure underneath our feet glowed, the symbols and runes flashed. My mages immediately cursed. Shit. A strong anti-magic suppression field. It was so strong that it would disrupt most normal magic, and Stella's portal ability. Edna looked back at the Demon King, and smiled. Well, it seems I'll have to hold the Demon King back. Lumoof, Stella, Alka, get everyone back to safety. Safety. Lumoof cursed. Not everyone has teleporting familiars. Eon can't recall all of us back with it. There were about 80 level 100s with us. About 10 of them were in the level 130s. I wasn't going to lose them. They served me for decades. They were prepared to die. I wasn't planning on letting them die. Edna's magical shield appeared and parried the Demon King's axe. Figure it out, Lumoof. Lumoof looked around. With the anti-mana present, it meant most magical forms of teleportation to safety would be out of the window. Stella's own void mana was somehow nullified. Normally, it wouldn't affect her, but there was just way too much anti-magical suppression on the sun rings that it overcame her domain tier abilities. The Demon King roared, and I felt it used some kind of anti-magic ability too. Edna cursed as the ability bounced off her shields. The level 130s were not ready for this fight. Lumoof. Alka said, somehow turning back to join Edna. Use Eons clone somewhere. The domain abilities should circumvent the anti-magical prevents. Well, waste Eons 10 years. But it's better than losing our people. Go. Take Stella. Lumoof and Stella both nodded. All of you, with me. We need to get to a location on the ringworld that has an asteroid underneath or within it. That's our key out of this, or we'll be killed by the Demon King. Lumoof activated one of his strongest blessings. A priest's abilities were mixed, some spell-based, some system-based, and it immediately empowered the entire group. Edna attacked the Demon King relentlessly, doing her best to attract the Demon King's aggro. But it was not the only demon. Demons emerged from everywhere, as more rift gates opened. The demonic knights poured out of them. How do the demons do it? Stella cursed, as she had to rely on conventional weapons. The level 100s and 140s could deal with the regular demons, and with Lumoof's blessing, they could flee. But there was nothing that could really take down a Demon King, and attempting to fight it now was a stupid idea. Thus, the only solution was to retreat. The win condition was to stall the Demon King, and Edna had to occupy it before it reached any of our non-domain holders. Lady Edna, may I join you? I hope you, duty, is already active. Alka leapt to join the battlefield. My researcher had rarely seen battle, but he had seen enough from afar that it didn't scare him. Of course. But I hope it's not a death wish. Edna laughed, as she parried a few more furious, earth-shattering strikes from the Demon King. The attacks left huge gashes in the glass crystal platform beneath them. You have a plan. Just one, really. Alka looked back. Lumoof, Stella and the rest was speeding through the sun rings. They'd likely reach somewhere safe soon enough. Edna parried more attacks, and Alka threw some bombs to shake off the smaller demons. You don't really need to help, you know. Eon could just pull me back once you get to safety. Alka laughed. Actually, I am just buying time. He looked back again, as more time passed. He was protected by a wide variety of skills and abilities, but they wouldn't hold against the Demon King. So, for now, he was just nearby, waiting for the moment, and watched Edna harass the Demon King as an undying knight. Her sword of anti-demons was like a golden flame, and it left some clear cuts on the Demon King. But this Demon King was at full strength, not yet weakened by bombs or traps. She may be strong, but she is not yet enough to beat a Demon King on her own. Yet, the Demon King was gaining ground, and pushing them back. Edna's range of attacks was also running out, and it was increasingly clear that the Demon King began to realize he could ignore Edna. Alka looked back at Lumoof some more. It felt like they were far away. Lumoof and Stella reached a particular segment of the sun rings. With the anti-magical aura present throughout the sun rings, void mana teleportation was impossible. Here, Eon, can we use the seed? Yes. It was a difficult choice. I'd give up the flexibility and insurance of one clone seed for the next 10 years. But I had to. I wouldn't let these people die. Not when they were so close to the domain level. Lumoof pulled out the clone seed from his pocket space, and with a punch with his entire strength, punched the platform. It left a crack. It wasn't necessary. My seed pierced through the platform like it wasn't there, and zoomed towards the rocky portion hidden underneath all the glass and crystal. My ability to seek out soil is uncanny, and a clone emerged. My tree cracked through the platform and the turbulent magics, and I felt the magical power of the sun rings interact with my own. It was strong, and felt like burning lava. This sun ring produced more mana than I had, a few times over. The Valthorns looked relieved, as they rushed to the clone. All right, let's send you guys back. What about those on the surface? There were some of them still on the world's surface, not on the sun ring. They'll have to wait. Stella will have to come back and pick them up. They touched my tree, and I sent them home. Lumoof and Stella didn't go through. They waited. Should we go help Edna and Alka? The Demon King naturally felt the presence of my clone, and immediately assessed me to be its greatest threat. It wanted to move. Edna pulled out a harpoon and attempted to shackle it to the ground. She wasn't strong enough to hold the Demon King down. Alka smiled. Edna, I am coming. Alka ran towards the Demon King, as he consumed some non-magical potions. His speed wasn't impressive, but it was enough to dodge some of the Demon King's magical attacks and get close enough. The Demon King saw him coming, and the axe almost landed. I always wanted to do this. Alka grinned. Always a bomb. Alka's body flashed, and at that sudden moment, the entirety of the sun rings shook. It was an explosion so large that it was equal to any of the traps we left for the Demon King. Alka had somehow tricked his ability into accepting the traps as a single superstructure. A sudden burst of light was so bright it briefly outshone everything in the world, and could even be seen on the world's surface. The explosion ripped through a portion of the Sun Ring's platform, and charred the Demon King. But this was no ordinary Demon King. It was a defender, and its toughness was incredible. The explosion merely revealed an inner self that was thoroughly unharmed. Slimmer. Smaller. But still just as powerful. It had a sort of liquid blood that came down with the fury of an angry god. Alka cursed. Oh fuck. I pulled my domain holder back home, using my Court of the TreeTree. The attack wrecked the already wrecked platform. The sun ring shook, as a segment of the sun ring cracked and shattered. Edna laughed. Oh dear. Eon, I think we're done here. Agreed. Lumoof and Stella answered. I pulled all of my 3 remaining domain holders home. My clone was the only thing left on the dark side of the sun ring. I had never fought a Demon King head-on. This was perhaps my only chance. In truth, there was nothing more to achieve here. The Demon King instead turned to my clone tree, and charged at it. Furious. Angry. Its attack was incredible. It met my wooden shields, and my shields shattered. But it did not hurt my clone. It attacked again, and my shields shattered some more. But its blades or claws didn't reach my body. I countered with my roots. I was stronger. I was no longer an ant trying to bite an elephant. I was just a small cat. But my defenses were leagues above my offensive ability, and I blocked every attack the Demon King threw my way. Shields were shattered, but I could make more than it could shatter. This exchange of none of us hurting each other lasted for hours. Then it stopped, and then called for help. Another distress signal. I sensed a twisting in space. A rift opened. Demon King, Defender 2. Arrived on. Question mark question mark question mark question mark closing square bracket. Oh shit. I cursed, as I watched a different type of Demon King emerge. Realizing that I was fucked, I decided to not let it have the luxury of killing my clone. I pulled my clone back, and unmade it. That was a disaster. No one died. I don't call that a disaster. Stella said. Luckily, the Void Archmage on the surface world quickly ordered everyone to retreat once they saw that bright light coming from the sun rings. They were far enough not to be affected by the anti-magical properties, and could still teleport it away. But the barrier is still there. That is true. But it is weaker. Fainter. I can see deeper into it. Well, we could do so again. When Eon's clone recharged in another 10 years. Stella said. We know Alka's bomb ability worked. We can bomb that shit out of existence. So, what now? Stella looked at the barrier from the safety of Treehome. We have a comet to deal with. 242. Cometh Tree. Year 245. The comet. It was a red glowing world from our view. We saw it only briefly, in the moment when Alka's explosions temporarily disrupted the barrier of the void. The disruption caused the null barrier to become so thin that we could see what was beyond it. A moving object in the void sea, and it moved slowly, in the still extremely large void sea. During that short window we were able to see it move. It teleported, at least from our perspective, but yet, we were fairly certain it got closer. During that brief moment when the barrier was down, a transmission from the comet itself got through, and we detected it as a momentary flash within the Demon King's core map, quite like when a software update was pushed out to all devices. The comet wasn't even hiding itself because it shouted its location to all the Demon Kings, and in an act of utmost confidence, the update even came with its trajectory through the void sea. We just couldn't see it on this side of the barrier before, and now, Stella gazed at the core map. Looks like once it got to the other side of the barrier we'd detect it anyway. All in, it would take about another 25 years to reach us, if our estimates were correct. We now had a countdown to work with, and we actually went to 2 of the worlds close to its expected path. We have 2 chances to hop onto the comet. Stella repeated. One in 8 years, another in 15. After that it's going to go through what appears to be a large patch of void sea with no known astral neighbors. If we want to hit it and destroy it before it lands, that's our 2 moments. I cursed. I won't have a clone ready in 8 years. Lumoof could just camp on the comet for 2 years and deploy your clone once it's ready. We devised a plan to counter the demon comet before, in the off chance we get to face our own demonic comet. The strategy essentially came down to invade, manipulate, destroy, evacuate. We would invade the comet, if we could reach it, and attempt to manipulate it. If we can't, we will destroy it. If we fail to destroy the comet, we'll evacuate and attempt to reclaim the world after the demonic comet makes impact and smashes into Treehome. Evacuate was my least desired option, since it essentially reset all the gains we had with Treehome. Invade, manipulate, and/or destroy the comet. That was my preferred option. My void mages were most excited, especially those who worked hard to manipulate the comet world. Here was a world, traveling through the void sea. They immediately wanted to know how the demons did it, and if there was a secret on this comet we could learn. If it was a device, we would steal it. That was obvious, of course. My entire institution was geared for this moment. To get ready for war with the demons. To prepare for an eventual counterattack. We knew it was coming in the days. Since the Demon King was slain on that other world. 8 years from now, its expected path would take it really near to the demonic turtle world. That was where we needed to be to engage in an attack on the comet. We would have to give up on the barrier world and the sun rings for now. We would return to it someday, once we resolved our comet problem. Alright, we got 8 years before it actually crosses path with the demonic turtle world. Lumoof announced to the group present. The announcement of the coming comet to the entire senior leadership, and effectively all of the Valthorns, made everyone panic. Some of you involved in the Margmarian Dwarves city ruins will find this extremely familiar, because we are essentially dealing with the same counterattack from the demons. The crowd went wild as they talked with each others. Eon and the domain holders have essentially outlined a few key strategies, and our goal is to intercept the demonic comet. We will attempt to capture it, failing which, we will attempt to destroy it with as many bombs as we can. Are we doomed, Lord Lumoof? A Valthorn stood and asked in panic. I don't see why we are. Lumoof said. Once we reach that world, we have essentially about 13 to 15 years to destroy the demon's comet. It's certainly not as scary as I made it out to be. It's a planet. Our initial estimates based on whatever little data we have reveals that it is a world half the size of our current world. Still pretty big. We largely don't know what's on the comet, whether what we accomplish is even possible, and all that. Our goal, therefore, over the next 8 years, is we must be prepared to bomb this world to smithereens. One of the Void Archmages stood to present their findings. The crowd quieted down when Lumoof raised his hand. We will be splitting the Valthorns into multiple task forces. Alka took the stage. I will be leading the destruction force. The goal is to blow this comet up if we can't capture it. The existing group that's making bombs will need to massively scale up its work. Edna, Rune and Johan led the invasion force. They need to build a massive base of operations on the demonic turtle world, and also lava world, and prepare for that day. They will need to get there to support the destruction force. One of the Void Archmages and a lord from Tropics World would have to lead the evacuation force. We'd plan to evacuate everyone to Tropics World around 1 to 2 years from impact if we realize we have no way of avoiding that comet. Stella and another Archmage led the Void Manipulation group, with the intention of redirecting the comet towards somewhere else. This was the same group that worked on the comet world, and so, now they would have to take their failure, and hopefully turn it around. There was also a group that worked on shielding and bunkering. Essentially, a repeat of what the Margmarian Dwarves did. This didn't end well for them. But unlike the Margmarian Dwarves, we are now a multi-planetary organization. We know exactly what everything is, and as long as my body stands on Treehome, bunkering could be a viable strategy. We just needed to be way better prepared than them. Arya and Icebang naturally panicked. They were not here when the comet came the first time. Can you move me? I mean, I know I am not normally helpful, but I don't want to die. Your true body is deep underground, right? If so, you may not be that much of a risk. We're talking about a planet-sized projectile. How are we not fucked? Everything on the surface is going to be destroyed. It's probably big enough to blow up half the planet and some. Even Lilies is going to be in trouble, but I guess they are not so much at risk since they can cocoon themselves. We'll see what we can do about it. There's nothing to see. Get some of your guys here, dig my main body out and shift me to one of your other worlds. I have no intention of testing out your reincarnation ability. Reefy said as I informed my fellow inanimate object located in the sea. Reefy's grown, and regularly sends me images of strange monsters from the deep. Leviathans, krakens and stuff like that. They are all fairly harmless though, creatures in the level of 60 to 80. Greater than it's a little too big for you. Less than I responded as I tried to share the estimated size of the thing. Ah yes. Reefy had discovered bombs and used them to bomb his enemies. There are merpeople in the water that he doesn't like very much. I don't interact with them, and these merpeople don't come to the surface either, so, our relationship is one of mutual ignorance. Some of them did occasionally travel to my shoreline trees and plants, and those kelp forests, but they didn't do me any harm. So, I was fairly content to leave them be. Lilies of the lake took the news with resignation. Greater than would you help? Less than. Lilies dug deeper into the ground. I just wasn't sure whether that would actually help. Tropicsworld, Mountainworld both began to have larger sites for Valthorns, as we increased our diversification efforts. We needed to duplicate everything we had on Treehome, on Tropicsworld as well, and also prepare for the possibility of evacuation, and beyond evacuation, a war to reclaim Treehome from the demons after the impact. The heroes were involved as well, and for them, they would be part of the invasion and comet destruction team. If I could deploy my clone on the comet, I'd then send the heroes there to destroy the demons' comet planet. Their tremendous firepower was essential, and given what we've seen on the Sun Rings, we are also expecting defenders at the same level as the Demon King. This buzz of activity was felt by the locals, as they saw my Valthorns gear up for a bigger war. The question that came soon after was simple. What were we preparing for? Do we tell people that they may die in 25 years? Should I tell the larger population about the existence of a demonic comet headed our way? Do we want to scare the people and set off large-scale panic? What was the right thing to do? If we could prevent the demonic comet from ever hitting us, then there's really no reason to set off a mad rush for safety. But if we told them, and the comet really was still headed our way, their cooperation would make evacuation significantly easier. We need about 5 years to prepare for a total evacuation of Treehome. We can keep this program quiet for 20 years. There's really no reason to alarm the people yet. If we fail during the 2 invasions of the comet, then we start shouting. Let's keep this mainly to those in power. Lumuf recommended. It wasn't an immediate problem to my people, but 20 years is very short to me. After much deliberation, there wasn't much these nobles could do to help, but if they set off large-scale panic, we'd need to deploy people to suppress those issues. So informing them was a net negative. Most suspected something was up anyway, because we massively hired new members for the Valtrian Order, alchemists, blacksmiths, crafters to hugely ramp up our weapons production, and also bunkers. For those on the other worlds like Branchhold and 3 Worlds, they witnessed great amounts of crystals and similar others shipped. We need to revive our moonbase project. It's likely as the 2 worlds collide, the space between the worlds will first meet in space. Stella said. Imagine each world as a bubble, the demon's comet is a bubble of its own. If we want to interrupt or disrupt the demon's comet, there is likely a third opportunity or chance when it gets near to us, if we fail in the first 2 meeting points. Its speed is likely significantly higher once the 2 different realms collide. Hell, I think that's probably the point where an evacuation is the only way forward. I doubt shields would do much against a planetoid-sized projectile. What else could we do? That was the question that hung on my mind. We still had at least a few years before we needed to deal with the demons on Mountainworld and 3 Worlds. We could, theoretically, invade the demon worlds and get at the demons in those worlds, but like Lavaworld, there was no connection. Lavaworld was cut off when the Demon King was killed. If I ever felt like being pulled in so many directions at once, well, I always have. Priorities competed with each other. We always had a time limit, but knowing one's time limit does put a kind of pressure on everyone to get shit together. We needed to prepare for the comet, but at the same time, I also needed my people to get stronger. For those who had not gotten their domains, they worked harder to get it. They attacked the dungeons with renewed vigor, because with the blessings of the Pantheon, they knew they would be able to survive. The Crystal King's golems were getting stronger. The Crystal King didn't back down after the Demon King was destroyed. Instead, he sent golems into Jonpu's lands. Jonpu responded with golems of his own. Creatures that resembled sphinx made of sandstone. My spies and informants claimed such prolific use of these old war machines had not occurred for centuries, and partly was due to the presence of Hytrerion on the battlefield. They had to shore up domestic support, to convince their own political vassals that they were on par. So, it made the two domain holders reveal their own gigantic creatures. Their own spies and people hyped up the strength of their own giant golems, but it was clear they all were nothing much compared Hytrerion's incredible arsenal. In this big rod-waving contest, I have the biggest, best gun. Not much to be proud of, and honestly, an old war machine made from a demon walker reduced to military grandstanding was just sad. There were fragments of the materials from the sun rings in my biolabs. Things that I needed to study. I didn't know what certain parts of them were. They had a component part that was likely to be the anti-magic sand that had been processed into glass. But the steel was not a type of steel found on any of the worlds so far. That meant the demons had access to a kind of unique metal we didn't have, and if we wanted to compete with the demons on the same level of ability, we needed to have this metal too. I called one of the Void Archmages. We still only had 4, plus Stella, that made 5. Stella's already busy. One of them worked on the invasion, one worked on the evacuation plans, one worked on the surveys and listening devices throughout all the demon worlds, and another one worked on the demon comet void sea manipulation plans. I needed him to hop worlds, and get this metal while the rest of them worked on their tasks. He would go with a small group of protectors. They were off. Those that were still here, they continued to study the metals. We are not sure whether they are engineered, or an alloy, or whether they are natural. My team worked on it anyway, because it was key to their sun ring structure. If we could identify the weaknesses, perhaps some kind of magical frequency, or a specific breakpoint, we could tailor our explosives and magic for maximum impact. There were multiple sun rings to destroy to gain access to the inner worlds. Where's your Void Explorer now? Still headed in the other direction. Since her Void Explorer left Eulera, she went further in the other direction. The hope was that we could reach some of the god-inhabited worlds. Places where the influence of Ava, Gaia or whatever was strong. I'd want to speak to them, and then, get them to help us in our fight. They are strong. I am fairly certain Ava in his or her homeworld would have incredible power that even a demon king is no threat. But nothing. Nope. Not yet. I hope I get somewhere. Soon. Interlude. Lizardfolk 2. Life for the migrated lizard people was comfortable, but different. The migrants enjoyed the comforts and the outward safety, but in private, they argued and bickered over the trade-off. Jan suffered their pleas and whines, for he is chief. It is him, who they blame for their situation. After all, he suggested this particular location. This place is not the way of the lizard people. Tradition, as it is, resisted change. Jan felt tradition was helpful, it helped them make good decisions. But he was not beholden to them. They were not a rule. Tradition was not always the answer. Thus lies the first schism with the matrons, as that was not how matrons saw it. The matrons believed that tradition was the only way for young lizard folks to be lizard folk. Veer away from that, and the lizard folks are something else entirely. It was as if a lizard folk, and the culture around being a lizard folk was inseparable. That schism was at the heart of their dispute. Was tradition law, or just a recommendation? His ears, if he was human, would have fallen off, and he could now recite their arguments by heart, the words imprinted into his mind. But he didn't believe it. Their culture was part of the problem. Even in their small clan of lizardfolk there were the traditionalist, and the modernist who embraced the new way. He had hoped there was a bridge somewhere. Something to bring the two sides of the clan together. It existed somewhere, but as of now, he did not see the way to it. Eon intends for the lizardfolk leaders to see what life is on Treehome. 10 of your most senior representatives are invited for a trip to the Treehome. This trip will take about 3 to 4 weeks. A trip to Treehome. Where is that? The matrons asked. Eon's homeworld. Jan gasped. In his day-to-day life, he had heard whispers and rumors that these people were otherworlders, but it was another thing to travel there. Naturally, they couldn't miss the opportunity. Jan and 9 others came, and there were many others. Lizard folk, elves, and the other migrants had all selected their own representatives for the trip. Jan recognized a few familiar faces, faces he met during the monthly migrant integration meetings. They gathered for the trip at the floor of the gigantic tree of Branchhold. They didn't like being here, just approaching it felt them with a sense of such overwhelming dread, and he could see the same, pale-faced expression on his other clan members. They weren't exactly sure why. They brought some luggage along, stored in standardized bags provided by the Branchhold's officials. On the ground, there was clearly some differentiation between the officials of Branchhold and those of this tree home. They had a slightly different badge that pulsed and had a strange scent. Please stand here. The transportation process will begin shortly. Jan saw the first of the other groups vanish suddenly, and one of the matrons shouted in surprise. The officials quickly calmed her down, explaining that it is a teleportation spell of some kind. The matrons shouted back, at first, claiming that it lacked the mana presence for a spell. Chief Jan, you're next. The officers guided them to the location. He stood, and just as suddenly, he felt a vine touch him. It sent something through him, and at that point, you will be sent to another world. Do you agree? He could refuse, but he felt that the spell could send him through anyway. He knew by instinct it was powerful enough to overpower him. Jan nodded, and it was instantaneous. In a sudden, he was elsewhere. The rest of the representatives from his clan joined him just moments later. The eldest matron was amazed. She hadn't known of a skill that could send one through worlds. The air immediately felt different, the stench of the demonic presence gone, replaced by the overwhelming presence in the air, a kind of natural magic. Branchhold was still surrounded by quite a lot of corrupted demonlands, territories unclaimed, and that stench still drifted to Branchhold occasionally. Here. Nothing. Welcome. Everyone was here, and there were 100 of them. They were located in a deep valley, though with all the bright lighting, it's hard to tell. Please, this way. They were guided to a convoy of tour beetles. The wide-eyed lizard folks were led into protected beetles, where they witnessed the vast, sprawling metropolis of Freshka. Freshka's various districts were visible as the beetles crossed the little crest of a hill. Jan's slitted lizard eyes scanned the metropolis from their vantage point. The segments of the academic district with the towers of the FTC, the military magic district where the Valtrian order and the mages trained, and the sprawling economic and residential segments that took up all the spaces in between. He had seen large cities, but never so large. I've never seen a city so large. One of the female matrons said, and the eldest matron was just silent. Jan knew she had a lot to take in. Silence was how she processed information. After a short moment, the beetles ferried them through the streets on the dedicated branchways that crisscross the city. Traffic was hardly ideal in Freshka. Even the dedicated branchways had to share traffic with many other beetles, among the other dedicated paths made from branches, and underground route paths that moved people from place to place. And so messy. Another human, one of the leaders of the human faction of Branchhold, commented. Some refer to that as being alive. A city that lives. Jan began to tour the districts. Their first stop was the education district, and they were greeted by 4 young lords of the central continent. A treefolk, a human, a centaur, and a lizardfolk. He froze when he saw one of the lords and ladies was a lizardfolk, covered in all kinds of badges and dressed in a beautiful set of armor. Whoever planned this trip was clever, and he noticed the matrons themselves glared enviously at the young lady. Greetings, I am Lady Gyron. The lizardfolk lady spoke to them. It is my honor to greet our esteemed visitors from Branchhold. It is indeed a shock to me, to know that lizard folks exist on other worlds too, and also a great honor, that I am tasked with introducing the ways of my fellow lizard folk to the representatives of Branchhold. Greetings. The matron's glares were a mix of both envy and pride. She was tall, and her body strength did not pale to any male. There was a deep sheen to her scales, a clarity to her eyes, a glint to her teeth. Jan himself was fairly flabbergasted to beauty. It was an admiration not unlike seeing a goddess. He had to dig deep and to pull himself to react. Now, I'll be your guide during this process. For the lizard folks, we will be touring some of the lizard folk enclaves in Freshka, and also a dedicated tour of the lizard folk villages in the outskirts. We will also be meeting a few elite lizard folk Valthorns, the valiant warriors who protect us from the demons. Everyone nodded. The lady had some kind of skill that seemed to just hold their attention. Even if what she said was boring. A matron immediately ribbed Jan. Why don't you speak like that? Jan snarled. Wrong class. The college of the nobility and the commoners wasn't of much interest to the lizard folk. The elves and humans, however, found it thoroughly fascinating, as they had some kind of schooling and academy system back home and so could compare notes. Then, they went on to the military academy, and that was when the matrons truly revealed a thirst he had rarely seen in them. The Valthorns had an area where the lizardfolk Valthorns trained, and all of them were strong, powerful individuals. Their stares and glances were greedy, filled with desire, even the eldest matron. Lady Gyron nodded, as if she expected the reaction. She was used to the scene, so she didn't react to the sight of these powerful lizard folks. The Valthorns will perform a demonstration of their levels of strength. The group here is part of the junior batch, at around level 60 to 80. The military of Treehome are organized around the Valtrian Order, which has the mass military forces, the Valthorns, which comprise the elite forces of Treehome. Within the Valthorns itself, there are further segregations into specialized units, with the junior batch of level 60 to 100, the senior batch of level 100 and above, and the elites, the best of the senior batch. Level 60 to 80 is the junior batch. One of the matrons wanted to faint. Of course. Lady Gyron smiled. The bar to enter the true Valthorn ranks is level 100. Level 100. To be able to challenge the demon champion single-handedly, level 80 is the minimum. You will meet a few level 100 lizard folks later on. How do they train till such levels? Jan was curious about the specifics. That's classified. I do not know the full details of what the Valthorns go through. There are some guesses and rumors, of course, that Eon has some secret dungeons for the Valthorns, but no one has ever found them. I see. Jan admired the incredible build and strength of the lizard folks, and felt proud that lizard folk could stand toe to toe with the best of them. The humans and elves were less impressed with the high-leveled elves, because they too had seen level 80 elves and humans, but rather, they were taken aback that lizard folks, that they normally consider to be generally weaklings, even at the same levels, display such exceptional strength. I don't want to paint the wrong picture here. Lady Gyron clarified. The Valthorns, even the lizard folks, are trained from young. These lizard folks are designed and educated for the long war against the demons. They are selected for their exceptional combat talents, and not all lizard folks live such lives. How many lizard folk are there? A matron asked. How many serve as tools of war? From what publicly available data revealed by the Valthorns, only less than 3,000 lizard folks serve in the Valthorns, though about 170,000 serve in the Valtrian Order throughout the central continent. Our total population, based on the estimates collected by the FFA, puts our lizard folk at somewhere around 80 million. 80 million. Yes, 1/3 of that number lives in the area of Wetport Lapul, which is the lizard folks' de facto capital. The rest are scattered all over the continent, in smaller towns, swamp and marshland cities, or in the various villages. The matrons looked at each other, curious what a great lizardfolk city was like. Will we be able to visit that city? Lady Gyron wasn't sure, and looked at a Valthorn assistant. I'll get back to you on that. The tour took them to the triology school, again, fairly boring to the lizard folks, but fascinating to the elves, humans and others. Some time later, Lady Gyron came with splendid news. Yes. The Valthorns agreed to provide some free time to visit Wetport Lapul. Lady Gyron said with much joy. I won't be going with you, however, as I have some tasks here. You will be received by a district chief of the city, instead. 4 days it took for the lizard folks to make the trip to Wetport Lapul. Nestled along the Lapula Bay area, where the once pure waters of the Pule River met the great eastern oceans. Along the eastern seaboard of the central continent, Wetport Lapul was as the noisy hive of the lizard folks. A stench foul to all but lizard folk filled the air. The place was once idyllic. Urbanization, and the massive influx and population explosion of lizard folks erased most of that purity. Over 10 million lizard folk lived across the many structures and lizard-made rivers along the coasts of the Lapula Bay, and another 10 to 15 million more across the great metropolis. Here, it was where the great chiefs and kings of the lizard folks would rule over the rest of their kind, though no lizard had dared call themselves king of the lizard folk since the great catastrophe of the Rotted Lands. For all it took was to look up and witness the great tree that loomed over Wetport Lapul, the twisted, swamp-adapted form of their guardian and patron, Eon. A reminder of death, an obelisk of the great restoration, and also a shining guiding flame of the city. Many other gigantic trees loomed over the city and the bay, spawned over the generations by their patron, but it is to their light of the swamps. The beacon of the Wetport, the biggest of them. It was both a tree and lighthouse. On the tallest branches of that tree, there was a stairs that led to a large, forever burning flame. They once wanted to replace the flame of the ports with a bright magical crystal that did not require the careful tending of a group of specialist lizards, the Flame Guardians. Yet, superstition prevailed, as rituals and beliefs emerged over the decades, and the plan for the crystal light wildly resisted. What was Wetport Lapul without the ever-burning flames on the highest of their trees? The lizard folks believed, even if untrue, that the flame was a remnant of the rotted lands. In truth, it was just Eon's copy of the crown of flames that once lit its true body. The lizard folks needed a lighthouse, and his giant tree could easily serve the purpose. Despite truth, symbolism, faith, prevailed. Eon was perhaps wise enough to know that it was pointless to stop superstition. The races sought patterns, and symbols, so Eon allowed it. It was the symbol of rebirth. A symbol of the way home. Rain or shine, whether storm or hurricane, the Flame Guardians ensured the flames lit the skies, marking the lizard's return. Next to service as one of the great Valthorn's warriors, the Flame Guardians was coveted. Among those lizard folks who survived that fateful day, and lived, many privately worshiped the great tree as a variant, an image of some animistic deity of the lizard folk. Heresy. It was not what the treology priests taught, thus quietly said and whispered among the closest of lizard folks. It was something a lizard folk would only share when their scales touched, and their bodies intertwined with each other. Yet tolerated. As Jan and the rest of them marveled at the great, foul, disgusting, and sprawling mass of their kind, they realized, at that moment. This is what we could be. The matrons realized, if nothing else. A sight that they've never realized possible, that their kind could have a great city of their own, so massive and so large that the residents of the Wetport Lapul would need days of scrubbing and showering to wash off the stench of all the droppings. Jan shook his head. Of all things, this was what the matrons wanted for their kind. A city of lizard folks. It was true that lizard folks did ascend to quite high and senior ranks back home, and there were lizard folk kingdoms and nations in the past. But, the sheer nature of lizard folk breeding habits and their weaker than average strength, on average, mean lizard folk kingdoms rarely lasted long. Civil war was common in lizard folk kingdoms, as generations after the founding king, so many claimed to be descendants of the king. Their communal breeding nature did not help, and Jan had always felt this was a flaw of their breeding practices. But he did not express his thoughts, as his eyes looked at the city around them. Their carrier beetles led them through the long, dedicated passageways, but they could see housing and shops that seemed to stretch as far as the eyes could see. Almost all lizard folks, though some other races had chosen to live among them. The bay was pristine, once, but much has changed. Instead, it was filled with ships of all shapes and sizes, and massive, gigantic lizard folks meant for war filled the docks. Pirates, privateers, sailors. Back home, Jan had never known of lizard folk sailors. They could swim quite well, but they were most familiar with the shores and seas. Not the deep oceans, but here, their kind adapted. Jan's inspect quickly revealed that their levels were not much higher than his own, yet, their physique and health suggested a far better quality upbringing. Their scales all had at least some shimmer, unlike their own dull scales. Chief Jan, a Valtrian order assistant, and had to wear some kind of mask. The stench was overpowering. We are arriving in another hour. I'll introduce you to District Chief Seraph. He runs District 2 of the Wetport, and he'll bring you all around. The beetle convoy of lizard folks stopped at the bottom of the great tree of the Wetport Lapul, and the location itself was grandly decorated. A large, opulent receiving platform, and ornately carved walkways, lifts and handles. Statues made of valuable materials littered the location, and smaller but incredibly beautiful trees scattered all over. Their eyes drifted to the crowd waiting for their turn. There were lines of pilgrims and young lizard folks, led by their teachers, minders and matrons. A faith and superstition reinforced. But to the matrons, they saw tradition. A tradition not their own. Greetings, Chief Jan. Must be a journey, to come from a faraway small village to the big city. Seraph was a tall, slender lizard man with spotted red scales. He was ornamented from head to toe, with gold studs and gold-plated scales to replace where some scales had dropped off, and gemstone rings on his scaled fingers. He had a large, thick necklace similarly made of gold and silver. Greetings, Chief Seraph. Jan responded. Ah, I must correct you there. I will be referred to as District Chief. There are many chiefs in this city. I am but one of the 34 district chiefs of the Central Wetport Administration, and I would be in trouble if anyone heard you refer to me as anything else. My apologies, District Chief. Then he laughed, and gently jabbed Jan on the shoulder. I am joking. Don't be a tense lizard. Your tail might drop off. We are not so uptight. We'd die from stress, if we're anal about things like naming. Come, come. Jan noticed there were guards, but just ordinary ones. Better equipped, and in better health, but noticeably ordinary. We've arranged for a trip up to see the light of the wetport. That's the first touristy thing everyone does. Or religious, I suppose. Touristy. What does that mean? Jan asked out of genuine curiosity. A concept unheard of, back on the mountain worlds. What you happen to be doing now, Jan? Visiting. Touring. Ah, it is a thing here. Pardon me. No worries. Village bum problems. Seraph laughed, as they waited. The matrons watched eager, cheerful young lizard folks, escorted by their minders into specially made wooden lifts, so they didn't have to climb up the steps. Each lift had multiple ropes and anchors, and once filled, properly secured and then lifted up to the top. The work of lizardfolk crafters and builders. But not all took the lifts. There are those who took the hike up the great tree as a journey of their own, the fenced stairs and ladders coiled around the twisted giant tree like a snake. It was soon their turn, but by now the matrons' faces were visibly different. They had seen so many, old and young, visit. The light itself, a flame that seemed to burn the tree itself, was located on the tallest branch of the tree. It seemed to burn ravenously, and burned the branches, intentionally so. Yet it never seems to spread, specialized lizard folks ensured it never did. Jan felt the heat from the bright flames, and watched the flame guardians go about their work. The tour group was safe, their vantage point was a large ring-shaped platform around the flames. They shared the large platform, the earlier groups were also admiring the flames. Jan looked at little young children, with their still tiny scales and bright eyes, wobble and go gaga over the huge flames. A matron couldn't help herself, approached the guardians of the young lizard folks, and struck up a conversation with the minders. The rest of the matrons swarmed in to join her, eager to learn about the locals. They were curious, and conversations between the matrons and the minders were juicy. Jan just watched, and looked at the district chief. Everyone visits these flames. Yes, it's a thing. We sell paintings and sculptures downstairs for lizardfolk visitors who wanted to take a bit of it home. Souvenirs. Really? Jan didn't understand the concept. Yeah, I don't get it either. Paintings and souvenirs just can't compare to actually being here, high above the city and being next to the flames that guide our raiding ships home. A painting or a sculpture just doesn't have that presence. Most captains and sailors have some navigational skills, but lighthouses and ports are structures that act as beacons in their own minds. Like waypoints, symbols. And if enough people believed in it, the system absorbed elements of the symbols. Jan couldn't get the matrons to stop talking, but luckily, the minders and the children had to go back to their care centers. Yet, he could see it in some of the matrons, who realized that traditions changed. Yes, there is an argument to hold on to original traditions, to write them down, to remember why they were, and what they were for. Jan knew that their own matrons understood the traditions, and their purpose. The beetle now led them to tour the rest of Wetport La Poule, which was different. There was a bustle, an energy in the docks that was palpable. Everyone did something, and wanted to do something. There was always a ship setting out, and even though the skies looked cloudy, no one seemed to mind. Just being here made Jan feel like he was a slacker. The eldest matron stood next to Jan, and sighed. They are so strange. Strange? Jan asked. Lizard folks. Sailors. Their world is different. They have large oceans, while ours only has one large one. Their traditions, their ways. So different. Jan nodded. We may be similar in appearance, but their people changed over time. A ship sailed in, battered, but the captain was a large, burly lizard man. A giant lizard person with scars, and tattoos that glowed. Level 50, pirate war captain. Enchantments. He wore gloves made of some kind of unusual steel, thick with magical enchantments. But look at them. The matron gave out a long sigh. That's the thing. I can't say they are wrong. They have life. They have dignity, their own city, their own culture. These lizard folks belong here, unlike us, running and fleeing from the flames of war. Our kingdoms never last more than a decade, and here. They have the might to defend their claim. We don't. You know we usually fall to infighting. The matron answered. Lizard folks of Mountain World are segregated. Separated. Treated as disposable units deployed just to overwhelm their enemies with sheer numbers. The largest they had was just a city, not even 1/10 of this monstrous, sprawling agglomeration. They never got large enough, which was ironic, given their breeding patterns designed for volume. Even when they did, Infighting broke their clans and villages apart, and they were back to square one. The poorer average quality of lizard folks meant many just died along the way. Their poor skills and abilities meant they couldn't even feed that many, if they wanted to. Jan nodded. I don't believe they are entirely right, matron. But there are things to learn from their path. Something in between the two traditions. The matron shook her head. Mixing traditions is even more dangerous. Jan shrugged, and saw what they liked. Lizard folks of wetland Lapul were truly masters of herbs and potions, due to competition among the herbalists, witch doctors, and shamans, and far better record keeping and tracking of recipes by the central authority. There was tradition, but new traditions could also be made. District Chief Seraph, when we were back on Freshka, we saw some Valthorn lizard persons. Are there any here? Seraph laughed like it was the most ridiculous statement ever. Is your village so small that they didn't even put a Valthorn? The great tree has people everywhere. Everywhere. He then pointed in a particular direction, where Jan's eyes suddenly saw a giant tree, just as large as the one with the flames, located slightly further inland, but still deep in the suburbs and districts of their city. Strange. Why didn't I see that before? Tree magic. Seraph laughed. I think. Or some godly shenanigans. But if you want to find Valthorns, that is where you go. That's also the super rich district, and the administrative district of Wetland Lapul. Super rich. Yup. If you're one of the guild lords or great admirals, you'll have a home in District 12. It's a fancy, really upscale place where they'd kick you out, if you got a scale out of place. Really? Jan stared, and Seraph eventually shrugged. Alright, I am half joking. The Valtrian order doesn't do that. But the private establishments do. Uppity farts with half-dropping tails between their legs. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't think you look out of place. Jan smiled. Meh. Seraph cursed. They think I am a tryhard. Fools with too much money and too little brains. They'll be poor in a generation or two. Jan didn't get it, but he nodded. Anyway, let's not bore you with class dynamics in this swamful. Jan saw through Seraph's fake laugh. All was not perfect here, and so, Jan tried to poke a bit harder. What's life being? Poor. Fantastic. You just make your babies with some whore from the bar, and dump them at the Valtrian Order's nurseries, and it's no longer your fucking problem. Then you're back to serving on the decks and a deckhand. Then at night you're pissed drunk somewhere, somehow, but never actually falling into the bay. Seraph said. Then, you try to claim every orphan lizardfolk who made it as somehow your descendant. One you don't have a hand in raising. Jan felt that sounded way too personal, as if he lived it. Ha. Didn't expect that, right? But anyway, I am kidding. I wouldn't want to be poor again. It's terrible. All that alcohol doesn't numb the fact that society sees you as worthless. Another set of statements Jan couldn't wrap around his head. But honestly, it's the middle class who gets shoved. Mainly from stupid, ridiculous, absurd property prices. You know us lizard folks, we don't like tall skyscrapers like humans or elves, we like our homes on land, with some bits of flowing water and all that. That's why we've kept building outwards and pretty much taken over the entire bay. The other races now call this place the Bay of Lizards. They were now back on the deck. Huh. It's almost entirely why they instituted production quotas. This place essentially bore the faults of lizardfolk overbirthing in the earlier half-century. Eon wanted to repopulate the lizardfolk population, which was fine and all, had everyone listened to their directives and lived in the old lizardfolk lands where there's still a lot of space, but every other damned lizardfolk wanted to be here. The chief stared at the district chief again, and couldn't help but ask. Why? It's the biggest market for lizard folks. Highest wages, good competitive roles, best employers, and the land where all the famous non-Valtrian lizard folks live. If you want to work for a famous buccaneer admiral, this is the place to be. Don't chiefs tell the young lizard folks what to do? Jan asked, as if the idea was so ridiculous. Why were younglings not listening to orders? In his mind, there was room for discussions and all, but once the decision was made, everyone had to follow. That was the way. Oh Lord, you're one of those oldies that still want to dictate younglings, errant Shaw. Jan paused, and felt like he too got slapped in the face. Metaphorically. Haha, my bad. Don't mean to step on your old tail, but seriously, young lizard folks these days are brought up with so many supplements and provided with such large amounts of knowledge and education, they are just different. You gotta adapt, or you won't keep your role for long. Wah. I can feel that you come from a place unlike this, but reality is, the young will have their own thoughts, and they won't agree with you all the time. Time to let go. Let them experiment. This place was an experiment, after all. Though, I suppose you could also say this damned place is an experiment that went on for far too long and it's high time Eons stepped in to revamp this damned bay. Suddenly, he now understood the matron's resistance. Tradition dictated that they defer to the matrons on matters of family and raising younglings, and he tried to change it. Here, his role was subject to change. He was old, and felt old. This was what it was like to feel like the world's changing too fast, and you can't keep up. He had been too selfish, and perhaps ignorant. He thought that his own position was safe from change. Was the matron's resistance arising out of insecurity over their own roles in the future lizardfolk society? Where did they go from here? 243. Bursting peas. Year 246. The comet was still behind the veil. The barrier's thickness recovered, which suggested that the demons had reconstruction abilities. They could somehow repair the sun rings so quickly even after Alka's ability blew up and shattered a chunk of the sun rings. Yet the transmission the comet emitted was sufficient. It'll cross the barrier in a year or two. Well, see it. This was a slow-mo truck crash. And somehow, I felt nervous. Demon Turtle World. Rune and Johann arrived at the location, along with the Void Mages. What a name. You know Lumuf's never been one for names. Rune chuckled and looked at the barren plains. As they explored the place a little more, it soon turned out there were more areas in the world than they initially expected, and some of which actually had some kind of murky, quasi-acidic pools and seas. The demonic turtles were resistant to those acids and we observed them entering the acidic pools and seas. Johann shrugged as more and more Valthorns arrived. This is going to be home for a while. Johann flicked a finger and out of nowhere, a small dragon emerged. The dragon finally hatched, and it was a golden dragon with absolutely beautiful scales. There were already Valthorns who asked to buy any excess scales, something which Johann rejected. He was going to keep all of them, and then turn them into armor. Dragon scale armor sounded absolutely amazing. The golden dragon hatchling breathed a golden flame that was not seen anywhere else, and even the mages wanted to study it. Dragon breath. True dragon breath was something lost to time, and everyone wanted to see it. The little golden dragon wasn't big enough to carry Johann yet, but it ate voraciously. We shipped meat over by the truckloads, but honestly, we were not exactly sure what to feed it. In time, I wondered whether Johann would be able to control such a powerful dragon. Even with its current size, I already estimated it to be something in the level 80s or 90s. In its full strength, it might even be able to deal as much damage as the heroes. Shouldn't we just hit the core of this world just to fuck with the demons? Rune laughed, his equipment strapped to his back. Think we can do that after we deal with the comet? Johann frowned. We're building a base in a place with a quasi-demon king underneath us. It's not very different from the lava world. You know the difference. Johann arched his eyebrows. Rune laughed. We're here. That's sufficient comfort for the guys here. Over the next 2 to 3 months, the Valthorns discovered that the demonic turtle world experienced regular, large amounts of tremors that shook the ground and moved some of the large barren sands. The tremors came from the core itself, as if something in the core of the planet kept moving. Our base on the demonic turtle world therefore had to be built with magical securing artifacts that altered the ground around them, such that the forces of such tremors were diverted away. The turtles themselves were fairly easy foes, and despite being demons, they were surprisingly non-aggressive. They attacked when we got close, but these demons didn't seem to take the initiative to launch attacks. They were similar to the anti-magic giant lizards. They had high defenses, strong melee and close-range attacks, and strong magic resistance. But ultimately, they had certain weak points, such as their underbelly. The void mages scanned the sky. The demonic turtle world had some smaller asteroids around it that floated in space. They were not immediately obvious, but once we found them, a group of them headed there immediately to set up a second position. The simple reason that the void mages had stronger power in space, and if we were not sure how close or far the demon comet will get when the paths actually cross. So, the wider our range, the better our chances of actually catching the comet in its path. My 2 domain holders fanned out the demon world, and began stealing rift gates. Along with the demolite next to them. We needed large quantities of demolite to supply the void mana needed to open a portal to the comet world as it passed by. Normally, my potato storage units would be able to store the void mana, even with decay, but I didn't have enough clone seeds to deploy a clone on the demon turtle world, and I also needed 1 clone seed to deploy on the comet itself, if that's possible. There was a suspicion from my mages, that the demons have a way of controlling worlds, and commanding them to move in the void sea. Just like how the will of the world said that they could be commanded to do so. If this is the case, my clone will be required to reclaim control of this comet's will of the world. That would allow us to then override the demon's instructions and steer it away from collision. In the meantime, we worked. Demolite. We collected so much demolite from across the entire demon turtle world, and bit by bit, moved them to the nearby asteroids. The Valthorns quickly set up a base, complete with all the life support supplies needed to operate on a rock without breathable air. We developed powerful earth magic, meant to move large amount of dirt and ground in a short period of time. The idea was that we'll need these earth magic to dig into the comet, it's likely not to have an open pit that we could just drop into. Powerful earth excavation magic was created and stored on tens of thousands of magical scrolls. Demonic Turtle World transformed into warbase by the end of the year, with tens of thousands of bombs and various ordnances. Magic truly is amazing. Skills too. The demons attacked us, but so far, the demon mother refused to leave its pits. So, we didn't have any reason to enter it. Not when I only have one clone left, and it's still in cooldown. Arya's avatar was ready. The wooden avatar was linked to her, and then, transformed into an icy tree resembling an evergreen pine. It had hair in the form of evergreen leaves, that meant, pins, and she said it was based on her original form. I should feel so bad for being born a scorpionoid. Kefri chuckled as I introduced Arya's avatar to the heroes. I believe I would rather trade places. Arya laughed. Being a block of ice for centuries isn't fun. The only reason I have not gone insane is because magic and skills put me through hibernation. The Scorpion Lady had lightened up significantly since a decade ago. Traveling multiple worlds and fighting demons across the worlds gave her confidence, and her new friendship with the fellow heroes gave her life a meaning she once lacked. Even though her relationship with the archer hero Chung was fraught with the usual relationship ups and downs. Then Prabhu dropped the bomb on me one day. Eon, I would like to try and have children with Colette. Okay. Heroes mating with each other, that's normal, I suppose. We've known each other for decades now, and for a while, it felt like fighting demons was our only purpose in this world. But as the class hold on our mind wavers, we want to have children. Why now? You don't have the need before this. It's just something we never thought about. The idea of having children as heroes fighting demons was so wild. I mean, I could imagine other people having children, or non-heroes having children, but having one with Colette it's just different, somehow. Hero class mindfuckery. That's so. Do you think there will be side effects? I mean, right now, the strongest, most powerful healer in the entire multiverse is likely you. I don't think it'll be a problem, but given what we've seen of other hero offsprings, there's no special benefits. Hell, you might still be like you now, by the time your kids grow up. Is that something you want? Well, be like elves, then. Yeah, and I am not saying it lightly, that it's going to be a huge mental block. Having children is fine. A hero losing their children. That's when shit gets crazy. A mad, angry hero was probably going to be way more destructive. I know. Harris once said he was surprised how little he actually cared for his offspring. It took his conscious effort and reminder to overcome his innate urge to ignore them. Prabhu said, I am not sure whether a child of two heroes would be different. I feel it might be. If it's not clear, the hero class is clearly designed for you heroes to have a light touch on the world. With as little attachment as possible. That is fading, clearly. Prabhu repeated. It's been many years, and I am more in control of the class. I feel I am getting better at spotting the class attempts to mess with my mind. The fact that you can have this conversation is probably a sign that its hold wanes. That's dangerous, isn't it? It is. I cannot afford a runaway hero. Or a hero that is destructive. There is too much at stake. Not when there's a comet headed our way. I don't even know if we can deploy a seed or a clone on the comet. If we can't, then we really have a limited window to hop on the comet. Prabhu looked sad. After the comet, then. I'd like to move to Tropics World. Permanently. That world doesn't get invaded. For now. I wondered briefly, what would happen if Treehome fell, but the heroes still lived? Would the mental compulsions on the hero vanish if their home worlds no longer existed? Was there even such a condition in the class? It was a pointless thing. I chucked that thought into the back of my head. But yes, after the comet. You want us to wait a few more years? No, maybe 2 decades. My child could grow up till he or she is 7, or 8, or even in his teens. Prabhu said. Actually, maybe there's no good time after all. At this point, I realized the hero's mind was made. He was going to have a child with Colette, and the best I could do was just support them through it. We won't wait, Prabhu said. We won't know if we die or not when we fight all the other demon kings, but we ask that my children be relocated to Tropics World should the day come. The heroes continued to pay me in hero items, and I suppose there's no harm. Not anymore. Very well. Eon. I need to go on a demon king hunting spree. Alka said. Oh, I know I've been tasked with that comet stuff, but I was thinking that the best way forward is to amplify my own destructive abilities. I need to obtain some kind of ability that meshes well with my always a bomb. If I could get a multiplier effect, I could fundamentally be a mobile landmine to soften any demon king, and the comet. That was quite true. Alka right now possessed the single strongest destructive ability that wasn't restricted by the void mana portals. I couldn't send certain types of superweapons through void mana, especially those loaded with way too much star mana. Working with Stella's portals, I am effectively a nuclear bomb. The goal, therefore, is to make me into a bomb capable of cracking the comet. With our resources soon to be split, we will have a problem. The Demon King of the Mountain World would arrive at the same time as when the comet crossed the Demon Turtle World, both estimated around year 253. I believe the heroes could handle it with my support. But it did mean some of the bombs would not go. I could front-run that invasion, and go to the Demon World, Alka said. If you die, and you have to be resurrected, we won't have you against the comet for a while. We don't know how long the respawn mechanism takes. Sure, I can send you against the Demon King, but that comes with risk. It's worth it, Alka insisted. The size of that thing is monstrous. We're not going to get gains without gaining some levels. If you can get on it, you can use your ability repeatedly to chip off the comet. What if the explosion causes it to change direction in the void sea? That's the objective achieved, I answered. Fair. But let me go chase some demon mothers in the heart of the demonic planets. We can start with the demonic hound world. It seems like a fairly regular place. We have good people in charge of all the departments, we can let them handle it while we try to find and field more firepower. I thought for a while, and decided he had a point. We didn't need my domain holders in charge of the nitty-gritty details and administrative matters. They should be gaining levels, and providing direction with their experience. Just like Stella's attempt to search for more resources. Arya's level 100 avatar joined Alka, Lumuf, Edna and Stella in his quest to gain levels. Sure, Arya was effectively level capped as a level 100 avatar, but they still gained experience from the battle. Also, just because the avatar was level 100, wasn't that big a restriction as I thought. Arya could make really powerful equipment, which could then be wielded by the avatar. This effectively added 10 to 20 levels of combat power to the avatar. Their first destination was the demonic hound world, and they headed straight for the pits. So we just nuke the demon mother and run. Lumuf said. Aren't you worried we destroy the core while we're at it? That's why you're here. You need to flush it out. I need to gain levels. You chase it out, force it out of the core, and it will come this way. I will nuke it when it gets anywhere near me. That should defeat it. If this works, we could free multiple demon worlds at the same time. But what if there is a growing demon king in there? The demon mother won't leave the growing demon king alone. Then we nuke that too. But we might blow up the core. That'll piss off the system and make us enemies of the world. That doesn't sound good. Let's just go down there and see what we have. If it doesn't work out, we can find another world. That world before the barrier world is another good candidate. We should have done research. No one's going to go into the pits without us domain holders being there. Lumuf frowned. Ah, true. The things we do for the fate of the multiverse. Alka laughed. Stella just rolled her eyes. Oh come on, Mr. Bomberman. We're getting close. The core was similar to Parasite World. It was a hollow center filled with rocks, and just a gigantic sphere of rock that was the planetary core. It was a sphere with tunnels crisscrossing its spherical structure, and a gigantic creature with its tentacles everywhere. The demon mother. It wasn't growing a demon king. Maybe not yet. Well, Patriarch Lumuf, please do the honors. Edna teased. 244. Outgrowth. Year 246 continued. Well, what are we waiting for? Alka said. We need to gain levels. Are there better ways to do this? Lumuf looked at the demon mother. Surely there are alternatives to luring it, just to gain levels. The demon mother isn't as strong as the demon king. In the scheme of things, we should be capable of taking it on without much assistance. Alka repeated. We either go hunt for demon kings to fight, or we go for these things. In truth, they were venting. They knew this was one of the best ways. The dungeons no longer gave enough experience for domain holders to gain levels. Still, we didn't have that much ordnance placed on the surface. Edna and Lumuf shared a glance, before both headed for the core of the planet of the demonic Houndworld. Lumuf activated his avatar mode, and through it, my vines spread through the core. I hated how this was becoming a familiar experience. The first time I did this was the anti-magic world. Then during the battle to reclaim the parasite world. Stella's void mages was on the surface, ready with the void weapons. If the black sun reappeared, we were going to shatter that droplet. Repetition. It still felt fresh and different to my domain holders. For Alka, this was his first battle, even if his role was just to nuke himself. For Lumuf, I could sense he shared my exhaustion. We were just so tired of all this shit, but we had to soldier on. I was tired. Exhaustion. I need 1,000 years of no demon kings to really properly rest, but the demons wouldn't let that. And it's unfair to the thousands of worlds out there that face the demon kings. Like the Ulurans. Like all the other habited worlds. My vines rushed into all the various holes throughout the planetary core and flooded them. The demon mother's energies met my own, and it turned back. It recoiled from contact, and at that moment, I knew quite surely I was stronger than the demon mother. I would like to capture a demon mother. I imagine the demon mother to just be a supersized version of the demon rod. Its ability to tap into magical ley lines should therefore be superior to most magic, since a demon mother was able to capture a planet's core. Could it even capture a sun? My vines chased after the demon mother's body, as it darted within. Its tentacles battled my vines, and it lost every exchange. I was just stronger, even through Lumuf's avatar. I felt it emit some kind of magical energy. Something weird is happening. It's calling for help, Stella said and immediately barked instructions to the team on the surface. Surface team, prepare for possible black droplet. The team on the surface was armed, but with my vines everywhere, the demonic mother soon found itself with nowhere to go but outside. It tried to escape, but though it still had the tremendous ability of corrupting a planetary core, combat clearly wasn't its strongest set of skills. My vines, guided by Lumuf, smashed into the demon's own tentacles, and forced it out of the core. You know, if Eon could do this to the demon mother, we should be able to start freeing worlds fairly easily. Stella said, but quickly regretted it. But I spoke too soon. Edna cursed as one of her spears slammed into the demon mother's tentacles, and she tried to pull the demon mother back. The demon mother was still exceptionally fast and it shrunk dramatically as it realized it was under attack. It released another warning. Something within its body vibrated in a certain way, one that my surface level team also recorded with their array of magical sensors. My surface team was ready for the arrival of the black sun, the teardrop. Alka separated from us, and took position along the shaft to the surface. The idea was to detonate once the demon approached, weaken it significantly, and then kill it. All right, Lumuf announced as my vines kept pushing the demon mother towards the shaft. Alka, get in position. Already am. Alka said, as he floated alone somewhere in the middle of the long pit into the core. We didn't want to detonate in the core. The risk of destroying the planet and the negative impacts from the planetary curse was something I didn't want to risk. There were magical bombs along the way. Stella, teleport us out. Can't. Core interference. Stella cursed. The turbulent energies within the planet's core was common with all the worlds we've been through. It made stable portals impossible. It was like trying to build something next to a swirling whirlpool with sand. We'll need to chase after it. Once we get a bit out of range of the core, it'll teleport you guys out to the surface. Got it. Rune and Johann nodded and they all rushed ahead. Lumuf was the slowest of them all, mainly because my vines were all tangled up and had to be withdrawn from the core. At that moment, I vaguely sensed a slowly rousing presence from the core of the Houndworld. The demon magic from the demon mother wasn't gone, though. It was still there, sticking around like oil and dirty grease. It's clogged. Lumuf. Stay. I commanded. The core is reawakening. But it might take a while. Lumuf looked at his compatriots. Stella, Rune, Johann and Edna rushed towards the demon mother, and the demon mother, as expected, ran up the shaft. Alka, Edna notified, as they kept harassing the demon mother with attacks. The demon mother seemed to have eyes on its back, dodging our attacks. Even so, not all missed, as some of Rune and Johann's abilities were homing, enemy-chasing projectiles. The demon mother seemed to recoil from every hit. You should have brought your dragon. Rune teased his fellow bow wielder. It's too small, and I don't want to risk it. It can't die. Yet, the demon mother was a demon king. Somehow, Along the way of capturing a world, that energy was lost, or perhaps, converted. Or given to the next one as a seed. Or reclaimed, somehow. I haven't actually seen how a demon king fully conquered a world. Did the demon king actually leave a shadow of itself, which became the demon mother, and it went on to attack other worlds? Or did it just somehow decay into this form? Theoretical questions that weren't worth pondering now, as the rousing senses of the Houndworld connected with my own through Lumuf's avatar ability. This wouldn't be a permanent link, since I didn't have a clone here. Alka felt the demon mother head his way. Alright, it's coming up. I am going to explode. At that moment, Rune, Johann, Stella and Edna looked at each other, and decided to stop chasing after the demon mother. They didn't want to be too near. Stella immediately pinged. Eon, be ready to pull us back. Yup. The demon mother surged towards Alka, unaware of the trap. It was already weakened from our repeated combat. The surface team began to detect void mana and demonic mana in the air, a sign that the demon son was coming. Then right as the demon mother approached and almost ran past Alka, he exploded. This was the second time he used the ability, and like a nuclear bomb detonated underground, it sent a seismic shock throughout the entire surface, one that I could feel even through my vines in the core. The entire chamber and shaft from the surface to the core was lit with a flash of light. An explosion. Freedom. The echoes and the vibration was deafening, as rocks began to collapse. In our world, it was impossible to have a chamber that led to the core. There's molten magma and mantle. But in this world, in some worlds, quite a few planets were rock all the way through to the core, and the core itself was more like a magical dynamic than one made of molten rotating liquid iron. Gravity was magical, a form of magic drawn to the core. The rocks began to fall. The surface team was puzzled, as the void mana in the air dissipated. Oh, it's dead. Alka cursed, as the demon mother was vaporized in the explosion. I was expecting a harder fight. It never was stronger than the demon king. I didn't gain a level. But Alka did. Just 2 levels, and no new skill. He cursed. I felt the magical grease and oil in the Houndworld suddenly seem less heavy. As if I could push them out. So, through Lumuf, my mana began to flow into the core of the Houndworld. I had a feeling this would be something I will be doing more often, once the war with the demons moved to another stage. The core's consciousness was like a scattered foam, gradually but surely regrouping. It would take some time, just as the Tropics world did. Right now, I did what I could, and purged the demonic energies within the core. I drained them through my vines and roots, through Lumuf, and released them into potato storages back on the other worlds. Lumuf got better at dealing with such mana fluctuations. He practiced extensively, and gained some skills over the years that improved his tolerance to magical energies. He still wasn't a fantastic spellcaster, but he had acceptable competence. But he was a domain holder, and expectations were different. It was a sore point, but my priest accepted it. It is nothing more than the demands of our struggle. In a war against the demons, I'd be retaking worlds from the demons, and I would need help. Stella, so no news from your Void Explorer. Did you know a space probe took about 12 years to get from Earth to Neptune? Stella quipped as she rested on the surface of the house world. I suppose she meant to say that space was exceedingly large. So yes, the Void Sea is this massive, massive ocean. It's like we're in this small paper boat, and we're paddling very slowly through it. We're moving, for sure, but there are also fluctuations in this sea. Can you see anything, at least? I could. Other worlds. But I am not near enough. Stella waved her hand and a magical 3-dimensional projection of the Void Sea appeared. This isn't accurate, by the way. The Void Sea clearly exists in more than these dimensional forms, but this is the one I am most comfortable with. Using the other types bends my mind and it's hard for me to demonstrate it in a projection. She pointed to a glowing red arrow flying, at the tip of a long spear-like part of the projection. This is my explorer. As you can see, I am going super far. Eulera was far, but I am now even further. I paused. How far do you think the gods are? I am pretty sure they are not clumped together. If they were, that does seem to suggest some kind of network effect, or perhaps a creation event. Stella mused. But I did recall you explaining what Ava said. That the gods are far away from each other too. If the gods were separated, the demons essentially could pick off one god at a time. I wonder, momentarily, if the demons have slain gods, and if so, how many have they slain? They have one in the demon son. So each son contained one god. In any case, we can only try our luck. Stella said. I hope to reach something. Somewhere. Rather than keep searching with the Void Explorer, would it be better to stop on one of these worlds, and try hoping using conventional astral paths? After all, their paths may be linked to some other worlds. It was the equivalent of stopping the use of wormholes or warp space, and using space lanes to visit their astral neighbors. I thought of that, Stella said. I am going to stop then. Maybe there's something I am not seeing. Year 247. This was a relatively quiet year, as everyone moved to do their part. Quiet, for me, of course, because there were wars raging on every world. On 3 worlds, Jonpu and the Sandpeople waged a terrible war against the Crystal King's golems. I had inadvertently caused an escalation in the type of weapons used in the war, as both sides unleashed stronger units against the others. Even the centaurs of Hoofhal felt this war was the most horrific in recent memories, as the magical golems of the Crystal King fought against the sandstone constructs. On Treehome, the vassal wars continued. The guilds did not stop invading and trying to claim land, and the defenders didn't relent or give up. The emperors were strong, and with their enhanced abilities they were able to somewhat offset the technological advantages in areas where the emperor's claim was strong. The royal classes, as strange as it was, were somewhat linked to loyalty. The greater the loyalty of its ruled populace, the stronger the effects of the emperor's power. A soldier's benefit from its king's blessing was very much linked to the faith, trust and loyalty that soldier had to its royal institution. Not the king, even if it's often seen interchangeably, but the actual mechanics of it was actually linked to the royalty as an institution. Each member of royalty's actions and abilities fed into a royal institution modifier in the system, and also the distance of a person to its king and royalty. This was unlike a general, where the benefit of a general's power was linked to a soldier's position in the army controlled by the general. A member of an army benefited from every skill a general had that affected his army. Royalty's power is more subtle, wider, more pervasive, but also can be resisted. These findings emerged from decades of observation of the royal families in Treehome, because we noticed there wasn't much change even when a king passes on. A king's blessings and powers lingers on after his death. A kingdom doesn't collapse immediately, but a timer starts ticking in the system, and with each passing day, the dead king's blessings weaken, replaced by the powers of the new king, or, if there are no new kings, nothing. Ceremonies affect this sort of timer. A powerful ceremony attended by many members of society affects how quickly a new king's powers and classes ripple through the nation. Nations that did not have kingdoms, instead, contributed to a body of rulers regardless. The High Council, or Parliament, are members of the city-states. Membership in that body then gained the powers similar to a king, but one that is collective and shared. The Constitution, if there is one, gains quasi-king-like powers, but it does so very slowly. In a world where justice and rule of law is strictly obeyed, I speculate that their constitution, through decades and centuries of political investment, grows into a demigod of law. That opportunity was curtailed on Treehome, because gods and religion exist. The way faith is so intertwined with the political structure meant a constitution was tied to faith. It was for this reason that most non-royal institutions don't last that long, and this whole damned world is stuck in the feudal fantasy era. All this, tied into the powers of the vassal wars. Ultimately, with me and the Valthorns cleanly out of the picture, it is a contest between the financial, socio-demographic and technological of the trading guild nations, against the faith-empowered theocratic empires of defending nations. I designated areas where the forces of the 4 continents are allowed free landing zones on the central continent, so that the forces of the theocratic nations could attack the guild nations at their home. It was much to the silent annoyance of the guilds and their backing nobility, but the guilds quickly reinforced those locations. Internally, the Valthorns understood our ambitions were beginning to outgrow the central continent. We were becoming a multi-world organization, and we needed to exist above and beyond. We had duty to our home worlds, but we had to shed the shackles that tied us. Trees are often repotted once they outgrow their pots. 245. Chronometry. Year 248. The time ticked. We had 5 years until the comet intersected with the demon turtle world, and Alka was in a rush to hunt more demon mothers. Alka got a title, but the rest of us didn't, simply because it was the same title as the one before when we liberated Tropics World. This demonic hound's world was free. Lumuf stayed back, and made regular trips to this world, to get a sense of the world's mind. Each world had a will, and each will was probably slightly unique. Woof. I was flooded with sounds and images of dogs and hounds, and they came from the freed core instead. Dogs. Hounds. All kinds. I saw a field of grass and flowers, and dogs running through them, chasing after larger animals. Sheeps. Cows. Animals. There were just dogs. They were a little like the canary, but these were not truly sapient. It was just a world with dogs. I felt more images of dogs, and I briefly wondered whether the overwhelming presence of demonic hounds throughout the demonic worlds was due to worlds like this. Surely there are demonic cats as well. I should have known that some of these will of the worlds have primal, feral minds. Just like how Tropics World communicated mainly with images and sensations. On Mountain World, the local team prepared for the coming demonic invasion. 5 years was plenty of time, but with explosive crystals in relative short supply, the forces on the Mountain World had to find local alternatives. The heroes, in particular, led the charge, as they adopted some of our methods and used their hero forges to create star mana explosives. These were functionally unusable via the void portals as they can't be shipped and delivered as payload to the coming comet due to the void star mana interactions. So, they deployed and made them on Mountain World instead, and for now, everything was stored in my clone tree. These were incredibly powerful bombs made of pure star mana, and if I intended for any of my clones to go with a bang, teleporting these star mana bombs through my clones was probably one of the best ways. It's likely to destroy my own clone in the process, or severely injure and damage my clone. The Demon King could be early or late, but for now the star paths through space were still relatively fuzzy. The path still wasn't robust enough, but if we wanted, a Void Archmage could open a path to explore the invader's world. But Void Archmages are in short supply. We have 4, still only 4, and they are all occupied with their own projects. Despite that, the heroes are confident, and they have every reason to be. Even with our B team deployed on Mountain World to support the heroes, they should still have enough weapons at their disposal to weaken whatever came their way. We should be able to pin down the Demon King's location closer to its arrival, perhaps in another 4 years. Tropics World was our primary backup location. Large and mostly uninhabited, we maintained multiple operation bases back in the days of the war, but since its eventual reclamation, we granted the use of some of these bases to the pioneer migrants. But, with the coming comet, we had to prepare for evacuation of an entire planet, and a lot of my Valthorns came over and constructed a few cities out of locally available materials. Along with it came everything the cities needed to be self-sufficient. The pioneers did well, with the few pioneer lords and pioneer chiefs leading the way, and the relative safety provided by perpetual Valthorn presence meant there were already a few independent cities of their own. The great thing is that there's effectively an information embargo between Tropics World and other worlds, because almost no message got through without the Void Mages, or me knowing about it. Message spells didn't work across worlds, though there are some magical ability that allowed communication across worlds. My Valthorns tested certain communication abilities like Mind Link, which allowed 2 people to maintain a mental link, and it persisted even through other worlds, albeit at a high mana cost per message. In time we would probably need to figure out a way to tweak the rift gates such that they function as information routers and modems. Prior to our reclamation of the Tropic World, there were already multiple large forests due to my presence in the long war against the parasitic demons, and these days, the entire world was pretty much covered with trees, except for the areas where the terrain warped to suit the recovering core's preferences. The pioneers had to adapt to the new environment, and they did so with quite a bit of success since the beginning of the reclamation projects. But so far, the core somehow knew where we were and no one had actually died when it did some unusual terrain adjustments. I estimate the core to be about a third of Treehome's strength since its freedom 3 decades ago. The rate of recovery over the past 3 decades appeared to be fairly erratic. I am not sure whether the rate of recovery of Tropics World would slow down or accelerate. In any case, at the current strength it should be able to sustain the population of Treehome. If barely, I do have a tinge of worry, whether overloading a world with too much people affected the core. Stella. A few decades ago you estimated that there are a certain set of core suns, and also the command nodes. I asked Stella once more. She was on the demonic turtle world, setting up more magical platforms on the asteroids. Has that changed? Are these sun rings these command nodes? It seems to match, Stella said. For her, it's a theory she worked on for the last few decades. We know there's the black sun, and there's also the blob. The core has a single demonic blob that serves as the prison. I also know there are multiple black suns, at least from the core, but the demonic blob is the one with the divine energy. But we have only know of one demonic blob so far, at the center of our copy of the demon star map. The demon suns were located further away, and only one was in the star map. In their star map, the demon sun and the demonic blob were not far away. Why would the demons need multiple demon suns if it's far away? Was there a purpose? Or perhaps, more demonic prisons at the heart of it all? I found the demon structure entirely confusing, but in the end, to end the cycle, all of these things must be destroyed. As a tree, the demons have brought pointless destruction. If they could exist without resorting to blanket destruction and world draining, it would be much more palatable to tolerate their existence. Stella suspects it may be easier to destroy the demon sun and severely weaken the demon's ability to power its network of rift gates. Doing so would take out the demon's ability to invade new worlds, and thus turn the tide of battle in our favor. A game of defense and where we are the attacking party. But, if the demon suns are linked somehow, then that wouldn't do us any good. Are we ready for the first pass? I asked my domain holders. Alka shook his head. Based on the sizes estimated by the void mages, we currently don't have enough weapons to blow it up from the surface. But, if we could somehow access the core of this comet, we can teleport enough bombs into the depths such that this demon comet shatters from within. It's a shame we can't use the hero's star mana bombs without Eon's clone, and my ability doesn't work with their star mana bombs. A lot of our actions are constrained by this foul void star mana elimination. My chief explosive researcher then further explained. That said, we don't really know whether we can use Eon's clone. Based on what we've seen on the sun rings, the clone can only be used if there's an Earth-like object. It's not possible to deploy a clone on steel, for example. So, depending on the materials of this comet, there is a fairly remote chance that we have to count Eon's clone out. Stella said. Remote. I know, but we have to prepare for it. Not being able to use Eon's clone will be a significant problem. Can we ram an asteroid with Eon's clone into the demon's comet? Rune asked. Is there a minimum size of asteroid that is needed for Eon's clone to work? We don't even know if there's an asteroid near this demon comet. The best chance for that is when it's nearest to our world, when the bubble of existence of Treehome and this comet are theorized to collide. Alka answered. I mean, can Stella send an asteroid through her void portal? The ranger repeated and looked at the void archmage. That's just a mitigating step if the surface is hostile to Eon's clone. She frowned. A small one, probably. Not sure if it's big enough for Eon. Work on it. Alka pushed the void archmage, and she frowned, but eventually accepted. Edna chuckled. Stella already has a lot of things on her plate. Well, if there's some other alternative to void magic to move shit around, then we better get to it. Alka said. If Eon is willing to kidnap some angels, for example. I rejected that idea. No kidnaps. I don't want to ruin a potentially sensitive relationship with the angels. They appear to be the kind that remembers such transgressions, and petty enough to wage a war over it. Alka laughed. We'll have to make some enemies, even with people we like, Eon. We need their angelic powers. If we can breed some of our own. Edna stepped in. Alka, I think that's probably not where we want to go. The scientist paused as he realized he probably said too much. Yes. Year 249. There was nothing much to do beyond watching my folks prepare for the inevitable. My trees and research trees did their best to find ways to dig into the demon's planet. It took slightly longer than expected, but the demon's comet could now be seen on the Demon King's core. Our magical sensors picked up its transmission to each of the demon worlds. A group of my mages tried to figure out how the demon sent transmissions through the Void Sea, because if we could replicate that, we could have interworld communication that's not entirely reliant on my network of clones. My domain holders were busy, but with the Houndworld freed from the demon's hold, it was also another potential evacuation spot. But it was a lot less accessible, because it required my void mages to multiple hops to reach the Houndworld. A smaller group went and set up an operating base anyway. The Vassal wars had a small breather this year. Both sides grew weary and tired of the war, and the merchant guilds wanted to consolidate their positions. So, in an entirely unplanned moment, most of the guilds and the defenders just stopped launching new offensives, focused on their own defenses and shoring up their own economy. They will return to the wars eventually, but the breather gave the general populace a great chance to recover from damage. Until it all gets destroyed all over again. Do you feel we are increasingly becoming irrelevant? Chung asked the other heroes one day when they were on Mountainworld. The preparations were going well, and there was still leisure time. I didn't push the heroes very hard, as long as they fought the demon kings. What they did in their free time, I left it to them. Like Prabhu and Colette's plan to have a child. What do you mean? Prabhu said while stuffing himself some more. Not really. Colette answered. We're still doing what we are meant to be doing. but were increasingly becoming less important. Did the hero class suddenly trigger something, Chung? Prabhu looked at his friend with a strange look. They've been together for decades, and the relationship among heroes can be a little tense because even the smallest things trigger them after so long. Thankfully, they only need to be together when they prepare for the Demon King, and the heroes frequently return to their own homes to decompress. I am very torn on the nature of the hero class. It certainly has an overwhelming influence on the hero's mindset, and guides them towards fighting the demons. The best time to investigate the hero class is when a hero is weak, when it's still growing and not fully matured. But that often involves capturing or letting a hero suffer some kind of injury such that I'd be in the position to access the hero class and their soul spring. Just like Harris or Mila. I remember being able to remove Mila's class at one point, but with the current generation of heroes I had never gotten that prompt. My Void Explorer reached a new world. I am not sure if it's near the gods, yet. The gods could be hiding, and honestly we don't know how exactly to sense a god. I know that Ava's presence could be keenly felt, but there's no certainty that it is repeated everywhere, or whether the other gods transmit their presence. Therefore, it fell on Lumuf to explore this new world. Is it a good idea to explore when we face the prospect of a demon's comet? Lumuf asked me privately. Alka spent some time fighting more monsters in the dungeon, but since the demon mother only gave a few levels, it wasn't really worth it. Freeing an additional world was a risk, especially if it meant that world could be retaken by another invading demon king. Even the Hound world, without my clone, I didn't have much confidence in my ability to secure that world if we were attacked by demon kings since the heroes wouldn't be there to deliver the final blow. There's nothing much we can do, beyond getting stronger, but the prospect of gaining allies from far away is worth it. Lumuf shrugged. Alka was busy preparing weapons and checking on all the bombs on Turtleworld. Stella's still working on the void magic platforms on the Turtleworld's asteroids. Rune, Edna and Johann were preparing the invasion force. There were priests and other patriarchs to do the priestly stuff that Lumuf sometimes did. You're my avatar. If not you, then who? Lumuf laughed. I suppose so. 246. Wayfinding for trees. Year 249. 2 months. Lumuf said to himself. We would spend 2 months in this world, and no more. Stella shrugged. Don't worry about it. There are enough of us to cover you. Seriously, just go and explore this world and see what's there. It's really far away that I don't know what to expect. Lumuf rolled his eyes at the human voidmage. How strange could it get? Very. Each realm and world is its own little cocoon. Fine, let's take bets. I am betting we'll see humans. Lumuf said. Stella laughed. What's the prize? I'll take your next assignment to wherever, and you'll take mine. You know it doesn't work like that. But sure, I'll take the opposing bet. No humans. Well, add drinks to that, too. Stella accepted. From what I could, people seem to be living there. Really? Lumuf said. Very well then. Good luck, old man. Go forth and spread Eon's gospel. Lumuf choked. You know I won't do that in a strange new world. I know. Stella laughed. Have fun. The link through the Void Explorer faded behind Lumuf, the aberration vanished like it never was. I could feel Lumuf's nagging guilt, even though we both knew we had time. Exploration was important. For growth, for learning, for allies. We pushed on anyway. At this point, it was up to my team to do their part, and for all of us to show up when it mattered. Lumuf, my priest and avatar, landed in what seems to be forested land, with patches of greenish grass, and pine trees around us. The air had a faint citrusy scent, and as Lumuf's magical senses expanded, we detected the presence of wolves, rabbits, and foxes. Birds on the branches. Insects. Lumuf could feel the presence of the ground, and it spoke back to him. Or at least, it gave him a sense of where people were. As usual, let's just spy on the locals before we make contact, I repeated, and Lumuf's magical ring cloaked his presence. Unless one actively tried, magical perception would fail. Forest. It was strangely calming to be in the presence of the woods, and Lumuf soon found himself taking a leisurely stroll through the woods. None of the animals approached us, though we could feel their eyes on Lumuf. Instead, they scurried away and ran as soon as we even approached. We couldn't see the presence of the demon's usual star paths in the skies of this world. Cautiously, I took it as a sign that this world was not invaded, and that was a good thing. The demon's taint has not spread to all worlds. It took about 2 hours of casual strolling before we arrived on what appeared to be a road. It was a muddy road, but a quick glance revealed the presence of unusual marks on the road itself. Large, gigantic claw-shaped marks, and next to them, smaller, human-sized marks. But their feet were not humans. Or may not be humans. I might lose this bet. Lumuf smirked as he examined the dried muddy road. Beastmen of some kind. With lizard mounts, I answered, or war animals. Lumuf followed the path, following the footsteps where they led. As we continued along the path of footsteps, or claw marks, we eventually approached what appeared to be a camp of some kind. An army camp. I knew it was an army because there didn't appear to be young, small children. It was a group of beastmen, with the heads of either a lion or a tiger, and they wore heavy armor made of bones and weapons made of magical ivory. There were no young here. Each of the beastmen radiated strength comparable to a soldier around level 30 to level 40, and the leader's presence was someone around level 50 to 60. Our first encounter with this world's civilization was a war party, so that was not a good sign. Lumuf nodded. Let us watch a bit more, and see who they fight. They didn't detect us, and Lumuf followed the lion-tiger beastmen for 3 days until they were out of the forests. During this time, we listened into their conversation. The lion-tiger beastmen referred to themselves as the Sinmao, while their opponents appeared to be a group of wolf-fox beastmen referred to as the Mugala. They had war mounts that were gigantic lizards with scaled armor, which they referred to as the Chisaks. At first, we didn't notice it, but Lumuf began to notice something unusual about the Chisaks. They had a strange strand of magic about them, as if all of them were linked to something far away. The day of the battle came, and Lumuf watched the Mugala army approach. They were a small clan of similar size, about 30 beastmen with wolf and fox heads, and their strengths were comparable to the Sinmao force. The leaders of both sides thumped their breastplates and faced each other for a duel. Foul cubs, did your ancestors not teach you of stupidity? Your foolish attempts to encroach on the ancestral lands of the Mugala Whitewolf clan will be the death of you. The leader of the Mugala war pack shouted to the Sinmao war leader. Lumuf inwardly groaned. 2 months couldn't pass fast enough. The two leaders fought first, and to Lumuf, it was like watching 2 soldiers in the Valthorn Academy fight to the death. They were all so weak that it really wasn't worth it. We could capture some of them, Lumuf suggested, and use them to tell us more about the world. No, not yet. Let us watch a little longer. The battle was frankly pathetic to watch and nothing much of interest, but my fascination with the Chisaks used by both sides increased as the battle continued. We noticed the unusual strands of magic as if they were bound and tied to something else, really far away. The battle ended largely with a tie, as both sides were severely injured and retreated. But Lumuf decided to trust our instincts and follow what was interesting to us. The strand of magic that linked their Chisak mounts. My priest followed and traced the strands of magic in the air, and we noticed they came from everywhere. Lumuf, cocooned in his own enchantments and magic, moved swiftly across the land. The terrain of this world was varied and had a high level of diversity and frankly reminded me of our own homeworld. There were large forested areas where it's just vast grasslands, high, soaring mountains, and large rivers. But our interest in the Chisaks only increased my suspicion that something was strange with these mounts. All those strands of magic could be felt like momentary flickers in the air. The presence of a connection, like a message, but more than that. We traced it for a week and arrived at what was a large mountain, the tallest mountain we have ever seen. It's a mountain that was covered in a kind of red snow, and clouds swirled around the peak. There were more beastmen here, clustered around the 4 cities around the mountain itself. We spent a day or 2 observing the cities from the distance. Each was home to a different type of beastman. The lion-tiger folks the Sinmao, the wolf-fox people the Mugala, the bird-headed people, the Barung, and the rhino-headed beastmen, the Tandik. The Chisaks were used by all 4 different beast clans. This mountain was Mount Kinna, the holy land of the 4 clans of beasts. We're not here to meddle with their politics. We are here to find allies, if any. If these people are not worth it, we will leave and return when we have the time to make a better stand. Our goal are the powers, and anything strong enough to help us against the comet. Over a few days, as we continued our observation near that mountain, we realized those magical strands led to the mountain above. Let's go, I said, and Lumuf nodded. A mountain was nothing to worry about. As it turned out, the act of climbing the mountain was an act of pilgrimage. The mountain, which soared into the heavens above, was separated into 10 steps, and it is said that a beastman's prestige and rank among his clan was determined by which of those 10 steps he reached during one of the great climbs. Climbing outside of the scheduled great climbs was frowned upon, there was no blessing in doing so. It mattered little. We've roughly settled on the name Beastman World for the people here, though our spying soon revealed that they refer to their own world as the First Realm. I wonder whether they even know of the existence of a world beyond theirs. Lumuf stood at the edges of the mountain and frowned. I think we can just teleport up. Nope. There's something interrupting the magic. If there was anything worthwhile in this world, it's likely to be up there. Even now we could sense the minute strands of wills and thoughts, all from the various chisaks all over the world. Since we couldn't get up there by spatial magic, it was time to do it the old-fashioned way. Lumuf's body charged with blessings and magic, and he jumped. In a single bound he leapt up to the 7th step, where the mountain touched the misty crown of clouds. There was a weight from above, a presence not unlike the aura of a domain holder. It pressed onto Lumuf, and it bounced off like water on an oily surface. Well, a domain holder at the top. Lumuf mused. Without the weight of that domain holder's aura delaying our rise. He leapt up, through the clouds, and then landed on what was the 10th step. There was a large plateau, but it was not the top. It went even further, its presence masked and distorted by the powers of a fellow domain holder. There were a large group of heavily armed beast folks on top, with representatives from each of the races, but they didn't notice Lumuf behind the veil of magic. But they looked visibly upset and uncertain, their weapons were drawn and edgy. His Holiness claims there is an intruder on the mountain. They shouted, and each of them looked. The presence of another domain holder from the top, and Lumuf paused. Should we even bother? There really was no good way to make contact with another domain holder without seemingly barging in. It's not as if there are agents we can talk to, and those came with a set of risks too. I thought it was more effective, and more honest, to just go for the center and be blunt about it. Lumuf asked a question, then. How would you like to be approached, Eon? It actually stumped me. An earlier, more vulnerable version of myself would prefer for contact to be made through my tree of prayers, instead of my real body. Or through any of my subsidiary trees. More than anything, what more an immovable immortal, I felt vulnerable and compromised when approached. It's likely that any immortal that could not move didn't like anyone or anything to get near its main body, and would go to great lengths for things to stay that way. Our location, truly, is a sore point. We cannot move, and thus, our attempts to hide are made harder because anyone who wants to find us already knows where to look. Maybe I should first try to respect that boundary, and actually try it. So, Lumuf stopped, instead of climbing further. Actually, let's catch one of those chisaks and use my mana on it. If our suspicions are correct, the chisaks are linked to this strange entity at the end. Surely we should first try to talk to these seemingly mindless creatures. I suppose that's the equivalent of someone talking to my beetles, and expecting me to notice it on my end. Wait, I actually would notice it. My artificial minds would notice it, for sure. Lumuf retreated back down the mountain, and left the guards confused. The entire 4 cities remained fairly tense and on alert, as the guards departed from the high mountain down into the cities below. My priest retreated quickly, his moving speed likely outstripped what the locals could do, and arrived in one of the small towns outside a few days later. Lumuf managed to find a group of chisaks stored in some kind of chisak stables. It was more of a mosh pit than anything for these giant lizards to roll around and pretend like they are still tiny lizards. There were just a few guards, and Lumuf tapped into my avatar powers and quickly put them to sleep. It was easy. Despite their different anatomy and body, the powers of a system still worked, and they all slept like any other. Logically, a sleep spell designed for humans should not work on someone not a human. But system shenanigans meant a generic sleep spell would work on all creatures, provided their immunities are low. With the Mugala guards all asleep, Lumuf approached one of the chisaks. It looked like a blank, dumb animal. Hello, Lumuf said on my behalf. I knew he felt somewhat silly, but we wanted to see whether we could call on the de facto god of this world. The chisak did not respond. I know you're there. Somewhere in there. Linked to the mountain high above. The large lizard did not respond. Lumuf placed his hand on the dull giant lizard's head, and my mana flooded the lizard. My mana poured into it and searched for that little strand that tied the lizard back to whatever was up on the mountain. I felt it. A strand of energy. It snapped just as quickly as my mana twirled with it. It felt like a figment, a minor shadow of a soul. It shattered into pieces just as my mana reached into the lizard. The chisak reacted to it badly. It was already dull, but now it looked absolutely blank, as if there was no thought or will behind it at all. Failed. Lumuf cursed. He felt my every move, every twitch and movement of mana. Let's go to the next one. I failed to touch that figment in the next 3 Chisaks. I tried to be faster, slower, more gently, with a minor presence. But it didn't. Instead, that figment just snapped. There were still a few more Chisaks left, and then, one of them looked at Lumuf as if it had gained a few extra brain cells. Lumuf looked back. Hello. Are you there? Lumuf said. The Chisak just looked at Lumuf blankly. Lumuf sighed. Or do we have to snap a few more of your fragmented souls to get your attention? At that moment, that single Chisak experienced a convulsion, as if it was in shock. Lumuf felt it, and I did too. I felt a growing presence within that Chisak, gathering, and then the Chisak had a third eye appear in between its existing 2, that glowed green. You've managed to summon us. Domain has blocked attempted inspect. There was a moment of silence, before the giant Chisak spoke once more. Who are we speaking to? Lumuf smiled. At least our attempts to talk to a dull lizard did actually awaken the actual puppeteer behind it all. I am Lumuf, avatar of Eon. We are outworlders, not from this world of yours. It was a long silence, before the Chisak spoke once more. From the divine touched worlds. I do not know what that means. Another long pause, and once more our domain blocked a few more spells. Strange. It's been so long since we had a visitor from the stars. I noticed the word, we. Is this another one of those hive minds, like lilies? I wondered they'll be friendly, but then again, it matters little. From what I've seen so far, their combat abilities were not fantastic. Potential is there, but I believe there are a dime a dozen other similar worlds out there. Lumuf sensed it, and understood what we wanted. Greetings, then who are we speaking to? We are the great beast spirits, and collectively, we are referred to as the Batu. Why have you called us Outworlder? Where are the divine touched worlds? If there is nothing here, might as well ask for directions. We wish to reach and speak to the gods for their aid in our battle against the great demons. There was a long silence as the Chisak's third eye continued to stare. Lumuf was way too used to talking to domain tier individuals that he was absolutely unbothered. The Devourers. Batu answered. They still live. They are everywhere. Lumuf answered. Except here, somehow. The last we've seen them was I cannot remember how many solar cycles ago. Perhaps your world somehow drifted to safety. Away from their reach. Lumuf just speculated. That would be sensible, but we do not know where the divine touched worlds are. The last of the divine's messengers came during the age of the Devourers, and vanished with them. Lumuf nodded. If that is the truth, then we shall be on our way. Our war is not over. And it seems, it is not over for us too. Spaizzzer. Salvos has a webcomic. It's here. https://tapas.io/series/salvos-comics/info. Also, thanks for reading. It's been fairly disheartening to read some of the negative reviews lately. But, oh well, I get it. The weight of time and working for too long on the same story does that to me too. I'm exhausted, even though when I look at other writers doing it full time, pumping out multiple chapters a week, I think to myself, hey, I'm such a slacker. But I know I can't write like them. Our process is different, and as a discovery writer I have to go with the flow. If the flow doesn't come, it just doesn't and I write nothing. I've been lucky that I've managed to somehow push through the slumps, but at the same time, I really wish my flow was better. I'm honestly jealous of folks that can produce 10k words a week. I sometimes daydream that if I could write 10k words a week, I could finally finish Tree in maybe 6 to 8 months and finally move on to other shit. Anyway, thanks for hearing me whine. 247. Tree -2. Year 250. 3 years till first alignment of the demon's comet. We see it bright and clear in the void sea. Its transmission to the worlds were picked up by our sensors across all the demon-infested worlds. It taunts us with its presence. I wonder whether it's intentional, or it's just confidence that there's nothing we can do to stop a planetary comet barreling our way. Lumuf returned from the stint on the Beastworld, and Stella sent her Void Explorer further. I am not sure if we'll see them again, but what we shared with the Chisak's hive mind was a story told 1,000 times over. Instead, my attention was split on our preparations on the demonic turtle world, and also Mountain World where a demon king should be arriving any time. My void mages on the Mountain World observed the path of the stars to the demon world grow in strength and form, almost enough for the void mages to activate the rift gates and send our own spies through to the other side. Preparations on both worlds were fairly intense, but the preparations for the Demon's Comet truly stretched our forces and our resources, and caused wild swings in the economies of Treehome and Mountain World. We sent resources to our bunkers and bases on Tropics World in huge batches, enough to build new cities outright. Steel, iron, metals, stone. We bought so many for the weapons and bases we constructed on Tropics World and also the demonic Turtle World. To make bombs, we bought so many crystals and materials for runes that we essentially caused a shortage of runic language liquids and ink. To set up the void platforms and amplifiers, we bought all types of precious gems and rare metals. Our craftsmen and builders were fully booked, some of them working extra hours. The resource demands to destroy a demon's comet was so high that as long as any matching resource or material hit the markets, we would bid for them. As strange as it sounded, the economic and resource demands for the demon comet essentially drained the fuel and fire out of the Vassal wars. Soldiers couldn't fight without weapons. Warships couldn't be built without runic ink and liquids, formations or steel. Fortifications couldn't be built. Even magical scrolls were in short supply because we kept buying and ordering scrolls. In order to stockpile food, should we ever need to resort to a large-scale evacuation, we bought seeds and various long-lasting food types for storage on the other worlds. For merchants and for the kingdoms on the other continents, this wild purchase drove prices up, but to me, money is always just a means of exchange. There was always gold somewhere, in some other world where we can easily mine. Some of my subsidiary trees were even specialized resource harvesters, collecting gold and precious metals where they are easily found. Essentially, money was aplenty, and we could pretty much print as much as needed to pay our suppliers. Resources were not. Most nations, in the face of our massive buying spree, had to resort to export embargoes and export quotas, preventing merchants from selling too much, or only their excess supply. Some resorted to nationalization, where the Holy Emperor essentially commanded that certain mines were temporarily imperial property, in order to continue their war effort. Ultimately, the strain on their resources placed an uncommon burden on their logistics network. It was as if two warships sailed at each other, and both of them ran out of fuel. As the Valtrian Order, the Central Freshland Authority, commonly referred to by the folks as Central, we were the preferred customer for many resource producers simply due to the scale of our orders, the military protection we provided, and the banking networks that we controlled. If we put in an order, most of them would prioritize our orders, simply to avoid offending us. It's a threat we rarely used, but my spies ensured that the propaganda and word spread out there ensured most merchants knew their place and strongly believed we would. After the whole Vassal Wars, it was imperative as an organization that we were not seen as a lame duck authority. Our threats were real threats, and not just statements we didn't mean to act on. I think about that sometimes. For threats to be real threats, there had to be action. Seen, visible action. Actions done in my name. Actions such as bribery, kidnapping, torture and assassinations. Threats. Actions. Blood on my hands. Blood on my roots. Blood on every single leaf and tree. I think about it, and remember that it must be done. For the heroes, they were taking things easy. They were well prepared and there didn't seem like any reason for them to panic. They traveled frequently between Mountain World, Treehome and Three Worlds. Colette had a daughter, Rahanna. She was perfectly normal, like what a human child was expected to be, and had no unusual or inherited abilities. Both Prabhu and Colette were strangely relieved, and asked that she be cared for by us, directly. I wasn't comfortable being the trustees and guardians of a hero's child, and it reminded me of that time when Roma was growing up. History sure loves to rhyme, and with enough time, there is always a rhyming pair. Ken naturally understood my position, and instead volunteered to arrange for other long-lived persons to play the role. In this case, Ken actually asked Kay, Lausanne and Edna to play the role of godmothers. It wasn't the first child. Hafiz had many children outside, with his little harem, but Hafiz always kept his harem separate from the rest of the heroes. Chung, prior to his infatuation with Kefri, also had a harem, with some children too. But as strange as it was, I was fairly sure the heroes didn't consider their children to be one of them. I've observed Hafiz with his harem, and I could tell there was some genuine love for his harem. Yet, there was always a wall that these children didn't get through. Their children were not part of this little club of earthlings. Rahanna was different. She was the first child born to two heroes I've known so far, and it was actually quite difficult for Colette to conceive Prabhu's child. It was a matter that strained the couple's relationship, and was instructive to both Kefri and Chung. I learned something throughout Colette's challenges, even though I had to play the role of a voyeur, after Prabhu came to me for assistance. The hero class is incredibly fertile, and this was why the heroes could have a harem and get so many ladies pregnant. It was why Harris had so many offsprings, and why every hero seemed to have some descendants scattered all over the world. There were written letters and books passed down by various royal families that recorded that a hero's discharge could fertilize and cause a princess to be pregnant even after a month. Essentially, the class was really a super breeder. But this benefit did not apply when the other party is another hero. The hero class didn't like to give birth to another hero's child, and rather than promote it, it actively suppressed their bodies when they were in the act. But it was something they both wanted, and I had to find ways to augment both their fertility and align their cycles. It wasn't difficult to pull a few herbalists, healers and mages to help out on this project. The hero class resistance to fellow hero pregnancy wasn't extremely difficult to defeat. The class actively discouraged pregnancies to other heroes, but with sufficient fertility boosting stuff, it was eventually a success. Privately, I wondered what the purpose of such a restriction was. To prevent friction with a hero group. They already suppressed their mating instincts before they killed the hero. Or was the intention really to dilute the hero's bloodline with some native? Why? And why did the class make them so fertile? Was there a purpose for that level of excessive fertility? I had no answer, even if there were many theories. Was there a function of why the hero's genes seems to be designed to mix in the common genetic pool? A part of me wondered whether this is due to some kind of inherent flaw in the nature of the people. At some point, people must be created by the system. All these magical races didn't emerge out of nowhere. They must be created at some point far in the past, and perhaps the intention of mixing heroes' genetic data with the offsprings of created races was for some kind of genetic resilience. Again, many theories, no answers. The entire tree home wanted to know what we were up to. Why did we buy so much stuff? I believed that most economies were self-adjusting, that if prices were high enough, it would be so profitable that more people would do it, and that was true to a certain degree. But rare materials are rare for a reason. Even if one dumped more people at it, they wouldn't be made or found. My Valthorns thus considered the need to expand beyond the clone worlds, worlds where I had a clone, and set up mining and resource bases in the worlds such as the Angle World, or the Beast World, or many other smaller worlds. Mining and trading outposts, essentially, where we could learn from the locals and buy from them. 3 worlds, we couldn't do much trade, because only the Sand People and the Centaurs would trade with us, and with their own war ongoing, Jonpu didn't authorize any significant movement of materials or resources. The Centaurs followed Jonpu's decision. The human faction, beholden to their immortal Crystal King, refused to interact with us in any substantive manner, even if we knew they were curious. Their criminal factions were willing to work with us, but only on a surface level. Their suspicions of us as Outworlders was surprisingly high, and the Crystal King went all out on the Outworlder propaganda. To counter this Outworlder narrative, I did what we did elsewhere. Tours. For the Sand People and the Centaurs, we invited some of their leaders for a trip to Treehome, to see our world, and for them to learn. Over the past few years there were at least 100 such trips granted to the people of 3 worlds, and Mountain World. I hope to pull these 2 worlds closer to us. In time, these 3 worlds should be our local group, where all 3 could easily support each other. Despite this, my artificial minds already began to observe the same sort of nativism espoused by the Crystal King. Those on Mountain World would wonder why goods and resources were redirected to other worlds, instead of reinvestments. Even my Valthorns, a significantly large majority of them came from Treehome, and trying to balance the viewpoints of those who came from Branchhold, or the other worlds was a problem that would only grow. Secretly, I thought of creating a voting system where each world could send representatives to Treehome to deliberate on matters pertaining the whole. After all, the kingdoms and nations of the Central Continent all have representatives in the Central's ruling council. Right now, although each of these worlds are somewhat self-administered, their position is quite like the 6 ports, where they are direct territories of the Valtrian orders. It was a potential for dissatisfaction if the local citizens were not given a means to express some of their views and discontent, even if it's a largely performative role. We are a growing interplanar empire, and thus, the political and administrative structure that rules the empire cannot be the same one that ruled the Central Continent. It didn't matter for my military worlds, where the only ones who lived there were my military operators and were primarily a transient population. My base on 3 World, right now, is governed by an appointed governor from Treehome, a Valtrian administrator. Tropics World is also similarly governed by an appointed governor, but unlike 3 World, Tropics World has a far larger civilian population due to the settlement programs over the past decade. Branchhold, my nation located on the mountain world, has a large number of refugees who then turned it into their home. Someday, if Lava World or Comet World have their own populations, it is likely they will ask for some means of self-governance, at least in areas where it is relevant to them. Each of these worlds are in different levels of economic, political and structural development. The size of their populations were different, so the level of administrative talent was therefore different. The expectations and degree of self-management afforded to each of these locations cannot be the same. There were legitimate and valid concerns about standardization of laws, especially if we plan to have a large civilian group traveling between worlds in the future, for commercial and social traffic. In the meantime, my lords suggested the creation of a second representative council, one called only when I desired their views, each with representatives from each of the clone worlds. Year 251. The comet got closer, and my void mages actually tried to reach it from the asteroids of the demon turtle world. It was still too far. Even Stella couldn't go so far. Couldn't you use your void explorer on the comet? Edna complained, and it was an idea raised before. But the void explorer actually needs to travel back to Stella. It is not something that can just be dispelled. Perhaps someday, Stella would gain levels and unlock multiple void explorers. That would significantly improve our exploration speed. Still, all of this was not fruitless. We were getting better at detecting, scanning and figuring out the nature of the demonic world. Just like how scientists of Earth had many tools and scanners to detect the composition of a planet, our magical tools improved over the decades. Our tools suggested a high likelihood of crystals, and so it's likely to be a rocky planet filled with demolite. I could tell there was an undercurrent of worry and anxiety among the Valthorns tasked to prepare for the alignment of the demonic turtle world and the Comet world, especially the void mages. Everything depended on the void mages actually successfully opening a portal to the Comet world. If there was some kind of core defense, just like how planetary cores shredded void portals close to their core, then we would be in trouble. Infiltrate, manipulate, redirect, destroy, evacuate. If infiltration failed, evacuation was the only way. On Mountain World, the star path to the demon world solidified. We should be seeing the rifts soon, though so far, there was none spotted. My void mages on the Mountain World, on average, were less experienced than the team on the demonic turtle world, but they were still led by my experienced void archmage, and Stella still moved between the two worlds to provide some guidance and oversight. It's in our interest to settle this world's demon king as quickly as possible, so that we could redirect manpower to the demon comet. Alka, after a long and convoluted argument, decided that it was best that he supported the heroes on the mountain world. He needed the levels, and if he could blow the demon king up, or weaken it significantly, he could get stronger and use that strength to hack at the comet. I didn't want to risk it with the demon king. Demon kings can vary wildly in strength, and some have really unusual power sets, so I felt it was an unnecessary risk for Alka. Despite my disagreements with that approach, we put it to a vote with my domain holders. Edna, Rune and Johan all supported Alka's attempts to grow stronger. To the three, fighting demon kings was absolutely normal, so they didn't think it was a problem. Lumuf and Stella opposed, preferring the more conservative approach, and partly because we didn't know how long my respawn process was. Oh well. We'll just have to deal with the consequences, whatever they are. 248. Perplexity. Year 252. 1 year to go till the first intersection and my void mages tried to cheat. Approach it. Extend their range. Find ways to get there and buy us more time. By my mages' estimates, we have a short window when we can deliver people and goods onto the comet. After that window, it'll move out of range. It's critical that both Lumuf and Stella get there. My clone seed still has another 3 years to go, but if we can't deploy my clone, we'd have to make do with all the equipment we can deliver during this somewhat short window. How well proceed will depend on what we discover. Mountain World. The path in the skies above now glowed and the rifts arrived as predicted. Demonic spiders poured out of the rifts, but the Valthorns on Mountain World slaughtered these poison users easily. Their gimmick seemed to be a combination of poison and self-replication. Larger demonic spiders exploded into smaller spiders, and smaller spiders exploded into even smaller spiders. The smaller one was no larger than a basketball, but it meant that every gigantic demon spider was an actual army of spiders. It reminded me of tower defense games where mobs had decay or devolution mechanics. Spiders. These demonic spiders differed from their regular spiders by their body composition. The demonic spiders were made of the same kind of rocky, semi-crystalline material seen on other demons, and they had their signature reddish glow through their body. A few captured samples indicated that underlying it all, their nature was similar to the demonic hounds, and I was able to capture some to study their abilities. If my beetles could replicate that ability, it would significantly enhance my beetles' combat powers. It didn't take too long to overwhelm them with my mana, just like the demonic hounds, but once I captured them, they lost that ability to break up into smaller pieces. It was soon clear that the ability came through linked energies, linked to the unborn demon king, just like the parasite demons with their ties to their own demon king. Just as I dealt with the strands of faint energies seen in the Chisik, I have become more aware of the faint threads and links that exist between these creatures and their masters. With the same refinement and finesse, I attempted to tap into these links, to trace the path of these faint lines of magic and control. To see what was behind it all. My mana got better at piercing behind the veils, and it followed the roots down to the sources of water. The demons collapsed like puppets with their strings cut. Even the giant spiders collapsed and disintegrated, rather than resist. All it took was for my root to pierce it, and for my mana to begin seeking the source. It was as if I was getting closer to the drone controller, and in panic, just as it always had, its first instinct was to cut off the connection. I didn't know whether it was fear. Eon, you're making this too easy. Alka laughed. If we still want demons to fight, well, have to jump to the other side. Alka looked more than happy to dive headfirst into the demon world, and mess with the attackers. He needed the levels, and killing a lot of demons was one way to get them. Even if it's hardly worth it for him, it took forever for a creature of his strength to level. The rest of my demigods were on demonic turtle world. The demon spider's homeworld was naturally named Spiderworld, because, well, it had to be. When we got to the other side, what we saw was a variant of the Rotted Lands. A vast, towering world filled with huge demonic trees, and a lot of webs everywhere. I felt a sense of kinship immediately. These were trees, even if they were demon trees. I still keep a small amount of demonic trees, in specified orchards, just to continue studying these fascinating hybrid trees. Here, this was essentially a demonic ecosystem, geared to invade other worlds. The demonic trees were essentially vast spawning pods, each of them containing large numbers of cocoons made of webs. Inside, were dormant demon spiders, by the hundreds and thousands. Still, they were trees. The hybrid trees were under my control, now. Their links to their foreign masters severed and now mine. They still produced small quantities of demonic mana I used to fiddle with demonic equipment. The earthlings speculated that the demons were the magical equivalent of self-replicating gray goo. The evidence, despite my skepticism, generally supports this view. They may feign intelligence, even possess it, but ultimately their base instinct was to assimilate everything, and turn everything into demonic gray goo. Lumoof wasn't here, so all I could see was sent through Alka's magical communication devices and scrying. A group of Valthorns accompanied Alka to the other side. Well, Alka looked at his team. This world has demon trees, and our patron will want to study it. Each of these Valthorns went through years of training to get here. These were the level 80s to 120s, and so they know the drill. Each of their squad leaders went through at least 2 demon world raids, and knew what to do. Same stuff as the last time. Capture the rift gates for our void lady, locate the pit, kill the demons that stop us, and report back. The team of about 300 fanned out. The spiders were no match to the well-armed Valthorns, even if they were incredibly persistent. The entire world was filled with trees, and we soon found water. It wasn't regular water, though. It was purple and laced with metals. Poison for normal people, but the demon trees of this world adapted to them. Eventually the Valthorn druids began shipping some of these demon trees, packed inside special containers, through the rift gates back to Mountainworld, for my studies. They were adapted to the metals of the spider world, and the metals of the spider world had surprising self-reconstruction abilities. They were not very strong, but these metals, when stimulated with small amounts of magic, could remember their form, and would naturally reform that remembered form. A dose of magic later, the metals could then forget that form, as if it never happened. This metal immediately made me check the captured demon spiders. They were not made with this metal, and yet, the demons somehow managed to pass on the qualities of the metal to these spiders, which was why they could explode into smaller quantities. The demons' abilities often feel like borderline bullshit, because there shouldn't be a way to have such a wide array of abilities. The simpler explanation is that the Demon King is a kind of adaptive virus that adopts all the abilities of its parent planets, and then all its minions essentially get a weakened version of those adopted abilities. If this is true, we can conclude that the demons only have a few abilities. The rest is just stolen shit. The ability to capture, absorb abilities and then pass it on to minions. The ability to self-replicate itself in smaller and weaker versions. The ability to build void portals, structures, and the ability to use void magic. The ability to create and summon these infesting superminion controllers, the Demon King. Based on this core set of demonic abilities, the ability to unmake or interfere with any of these abilities individually, would stop the demons in their tracks. Stopping the demon's ability to build void portals and void magic would stop the demon's ability to travel and reach new victims. Stopping the ability to create Demon Kings would essentially reduce the threat level of demons to the equivalent of an army of strong natural magical beasts. This was the medical equivalent of stopping the infection vectors, or mutating and turning the Demon King into just a slightly strong influenza. Dangerous, but not undefeatable. Anyway, Alka eventually found the pit of the Demon King, but it was so rigged with demonic spiders and webs, that it wasn't worth the risk. He wasn't a one-man army. He's essentially a glass nuke. The Valthorns captured the rifts, took some more samples of every single strange or unusual thing, rigged the pits with bombs, planted our magical sensor equipment and then went back to the mountain world to await further instructions. My mages were more than happy to have new metal types to play with. The immediate uses were not clear, but with research and magical items, their usefulness often emerged after decades of tweaking, experimentation and happy little coincidences. Each small step enabled something further down the line. It was just how it is. We plant trees today, and only decades later do we know what they look like. Even if we have druids guiding their path, nature often surprises and takes unusual turns. We captured enough rift gates that the number of rifts on the mountain world was pretty much cut by 2/3. There were still some rifts coming through, and the demons likely had even more rift gates in places we didn't find, but the number of demons was manageable. The heroes waited. The location of the Demon King's arrival was getting clearer, and then we realized something absolutely annoying. The Spider Demon King will arrive right in the center of one of the dwarven capitals of the mountain world. This is ridiculous. The king of the dwarfs slammed his table when my envoy from Branchhold arrived with the news. I didn't have the resources to send a strike team to the spider world, not with the plan to invade the demon comet, and I didn't want to do it anyway. Destroying the Demon King on the spider world could trigger another demon comet, and that was a risk I didn't want to take. Thus, the safest way was to evacuate the capital for a battle with the Demon King. The capital could be rebuilt. My ancestors built this capital 4,000 years ago. This palace was built 3,000 years 211 years ago. Do you know how many ancient structures remain in this city? My envoy was apologetic, and tried his best to appeal to the distraught emotions of the dwarf king. But he was stubborn, and his people stood by their king. They were not moving, and looking at the city of the dwarven king, I certainly could see why. They were prosperous, industrious, and the city super well fortified. There were enough magical weapons and defenses to stop a regular demon attack. The people would lose all they have built, all the resources and time they invested in building this city. All I saw was how it would burn like paper before the Demon King. I couldn't nuke the Demon King if it arrived here. Not without killing the locals. The Void Mages scrambled to find a solution, whether we could try to meddle with the Demon King's path, just like how Lumuf meddled with the anti-magic Demon King. But the answer was no. Unless Lumuf was willing to hitch a ride on the Spider Demon King again, but the last time we did it, Lumuf was out for weeks. I needed Lumuf for the comet intersection. I called the heroes for a briefing, for a message that was going to be hard to swallow. The Dwarven King refused to cooperate and will not evacuate. The entire city too. The heroes cursed. Ken looked absolutely sad. I knew this day would come one day. The Demon King has so far avoided populated areas, but it was by sheer luck and the fact that the wilderness outnumbered cities by a large factor. There would come a day that the Demon King would strike a populated area. It just sucked that I had another commitment. One that threatened our world. Adrian and Kelly, the two native heroes of the mountain world, looked absolutely devastated. Adrian volunteered to talk to the Dwarven King again. He's killing his people, I will try to change his mind. The Dwarven capital was one of the most prosperous in mountain world, and there were screams of jealousy. They said this was a plot to destroy a competitor, despite our track record of predicting and dealing with the past Demon King attacks. The heroes immediately asked to replicate what was done before. Can Lumuf? No. He can't. I need him when the Demon's Comet intersects with the Demon Turtle World. He cannot be at two places at once, and I am not triggering another Demon Comet. My reasoning was clear. But the unspoken truth hung in the room. I would let the dwarven capital die. If they refuse to heed a warning or our assistance, so be it. It is their choice, and their choice has consequences. If the other cities see the consequences, they will be more cooperative in the future. As for the heroes, they would have to face the spider demon king without the benefit of a softening blow. I have utmost confidence in their ability. They were all much higher level than they were before, and my Valthorns will still assist to provide bombardment support. In fact, I soon pulled Ken for a quiet discussion. I intend to rig the dwarven capital with bombs without their assistance or approval. There are people there, Ken thought. I will have the void mages teleport out who they can, by force. They won't be able to save everyone, but the Demon King's arrival is a death sentence to the capital anyway. I am merely accelerating their death. Why not act by force? I will make an enemy of the world. Should you care? Ken asked. It would greatly endanger my recruitment efforts if I am seen to forcefully take over another world. I can recruit good people because I am still perceived as doing the right thing. Ken sighed. This is just all shades of gray. Someone dies, and no one will be happy. I want you to talk to them. Tell them don't do anything too crazy while we figure out some ways to deal with the dwarves. I don't think they will. Ken said with uncertainty. But I will see what I can do. The heroes' attempts to persuade the dwarven king failed, and all they got was more curses and mugs flung their way. It was supposedly the highest of the dwarven insults, to have beer mugs filled with beer thrown at them. The heroes' morale took a dive. They liked what they were doing before this, and to some extent, they had life on easy mode since we were able to spawn camp. Now, the horrors of their assigned duties caught up with them again. They would fight in a city filled with the dead. People they could not save, and it massively triggered their hero class's effects on their minds and thoughts. Chung took this time to talk to Ken on death. To talk him out of it. Ken, there will be a time when all of us need you to talk us out of this. More than ever, we need a friend who is with us. Ken gave the archer hero the eye. He knew what this was all about. Chung, let's leave that aside, and try to figure something out. No, you know how broken we are. We need a guide. Eon isn't that guide, but you are. You know us. You were one of us. You see the effects of the gods on us more than ever, and can talk us out of our failings. Ken felt Chung trying to guilt trip him. Guilt. That he should abandon the cause. The heroes from all the worlds need someone to hold it together. We are all these. Broken, cracked glass cannons. Chung admitted. We are all flawed in some way, compelled by this power, this curse. This duty. You can't just leave us and let us fight this war while you die peacefully of old age. Guilt. Ken sighed and kicked the barrel down the road. I hear your concerns, old friend, but I am not dying. Yet. Chung didn't want to let him go. Tell Eon to make you immortal like K. He can rip your soul out and place you in some other vessel. Let's leave that decision to later. My pantheon on the demonic turtle world heard the news, and Lumuf took a day to pray for things to go well. For Mountain World. For the dwarven capital to be safe. I found it ironic that he chose to do so, even though he was praying to me. He was praying to me. I am his god, and this god's hands are tied. 249. Threading Twines. Year 252, Part 2. The decisions of the dwarven rulers were taken badly by the Valthorns and Valtrian Order of Branchhold, and here, those native to the Mountain World wanted a stronger reaction. The response of the Valthorns from Treehome was relatively muted. They didn't really have an emotional attachment to the cities of Mountain World, but for the natives, some of them were immigrants, and some even had distant relatives in that dwarven city. Within these Mountain World natives, there were those that understood why we couldn't force the dwarves to evacuate, and why they had to bear the burdens and consequences of their choices. There are also those who believe that it was our duty to save them from their stupidity. Even more extreme, were those that believed I wasn't doing enough. That Lumuf, my patriarch, should be able to be here and save the dwarf city. Their argument was that the demon comet didn't threaten anyone yet. Not until another 18 years down the line. There was another chance since Lumuf could intercept the demon comet during its second pass-through near Lava World. The dwarves were under a much more present and immediate risk, compared to Treehome. Some supported this view. This view essentially created a rift between those of Treehome, and those of the Mountain World. I predicted this, but facing it for real was a lot more troublesome than I expected. Lausanne walked back to her table, sipping the already cold tea. She finished her briefing. Her mother and Kay sat on a small table by the side, and waited. There were a few more Valthorns nearby as their bodyguards, in case anything happened. The crowd was small, but consisted of the former heroes, Mila, Alexis, the few other accidental summons, and the senior members of Mila's institution of spies and informants, the Rosewood Hotels. Folks I did not pay much attention to, because they didn't have the intention to participate in whatever schemes I worked on. They were victims of Alexis's propaganda, and so we started on the wrong foot. Suspicion. Still, Lausanne remembered Mila. Her mother did as well. Friends, at one point in their lives. The truth of their origins were something the elves realized much later. Lies shrouded their relationship since day one, even if they meant to be friends. We were the same. In a different world, where I didn't feel insecure. In a different world, where we could all be open and trusting, perhaps we all wouldn't have to be like this. But what is done, and I allowed the lament of what it could have been linger briefly, before it dissipated away. There's time, Mila said, slightly more than 17 years before the comet threatens to blow this world apart. Does TreeTree have a plan? Evacuate. Lausanne answered without revealing too much. The fact that we can travel worlds was fairly well known since our attempts to educate the world of the multiverse. Only. Evacuate. Mila said. Lausanne was not privy to the full extent of our operations. She may be de facto royalty, and I still consider her special, as one that I've seen grow from a baby since my early days, but her actual role these days is ceremonial and diplomatic in nature. There are other worlds that are currently set as shelters. Dwellings and accommodations are under construction. As part of the arrangements with former Earthlings, Ken requested that we extend the evacuation offer to you, and those under your protection. Alexis didn't buy it entirely, of course. I knew her well enough. She doubted my intentions, despite all the evidence to the contrary. All because things didn't start properly. Relationships are like that. I think about how certain relationships could be salvaged. Like the Crystal King. If only there were a way to unite all the domain holders. We'd have strength equal to the heroes, or even more. This isn't all, Mila answered, saying the truth that was plain to all but still needed to be said. Perhaps. I don't know the full extent of it. Lausanne answered frankly. When did Eon first know about the presence of the comet? Lausanne paused for a moment and sighed. 8 years ago. Alexis slammed the table with her beetle-like arm. It was made of armored carapace and had improved slightly since we last met. But she was not stronger than Lausanne. I could feel it through my prying trees. Ridiculous. And you choose to tell us now. In fact, I even felt like she was weaker. They have lived in this world for decades, and strangely, plateaued. They lacked the means to gain more levels, especially with the demon issue mostly sorted. I had taken away their stairways to ascension, gobbled up all the experience for ourselves to feed my little army of Valthorns. I would do so to all the worlds I establish a clone in. Thinking from an experience point of view, I am the invader, muscling in to rob the natives of their experience and future growth. Lausanne merely nodded. There is still an estimated 15 or so years before the demon's comet approaches us, so, there is plenty of time to decide whether you want to evacuate, or stay put. And face certain death. Mila clarified. No, knowing TreeTree, there is a plan in motion. Is it linked to the massive resource collection that no? It has to be linked. Now everything fits. Again, I don't know the details. Lausanne answered, ignoring Mila's attempt to gather more out of her. I come to offer a chance to migrate to another world, at the behest of Ken, one of your former Earthlings. You have 10 or so years to decide. Wait, when will this be made public? Mila asked. I was told, about 6 years before impact. The mass migrations will occur then. This isn't right. We have front place tickets because we are Earthlings. Mila answered. Lausanne thought for a moment before she realized Mila had a point. That's frankly a good point. I will bring it up with Eon. Tell us more about this other world. One of the reincarnated humans was just a tiny lizard. He hardly leveled, but remained under the care of Alexis. I wasn't sure when and how they managed to find him, but it seemed that the gods did have accidents every now and then. Lausanne nodded and began to explain about the world that would host them. She has been there a few times. Am I wrong? I asked Lumoof as he waited on the turtle world. The comet remained stubbornly out of reach. Should I tell the truth to the whole world? The consequences of telling the world that we are aware of an incoming disaster we may not be able to stop. To tell the world that death is coming for them, and the only sure way out is to leave. My Valthorns did not doubt my decision to keep it a secret. We know so little about it, so why cause panic in the general population by informing them of this coming disaster? But I realized that was also selfish because we didn't want to trigger widespread chaos while we tried to prepare for the comet. In a world where resources and manpower were no constraint, I should inform the general public of the looming threats, and they should then decide to make their assessment and act accordingly. No. There was likely nothing they could do. The only choice the locals could make was to migrate to Tropics World, since Lava World, Mountain World and Three Worlds were not suitable for large-scale migration. There was no way these two existing worlds could absorb such a large immigrant population without causing even more conflict and fighting, and it would massively wreck the relationship we have with the existing local rulers. In theory, I could forcefully assume control of Mountain World, and I do hear folks within the Valthorns who advocate that sort of view. Three Worlds still has the three hegemons that could potentially resist me, and as such, that's not within the picture. So, for the locals, the only effective choice they have is to migrate, or stay. Should I tell the world of their future death, one that they could do nothing about but wait until the time comes? Not just that, the whole reason this comet occurred is because of a sequence of events that we triggered, because we defeated the Demon King before it arrived our way. I couldn't help but briefly consider whether this was my fault. No. Defeating the Demon King on their home world, before they could even damage our world is sensible, even if the consequence was retaliation. A planet-sized retaliation. Whether the people living their lives deserve to know. How different is it from an oracle making a prophecy about a coming doom? No. Yes. I wasn't sure. I decided to look at it from the lens of preparing for the comet. Not telling the world would buy us time to make more preparations. It is not preparations they would desire. It is not what the locals will want. It even reeks of a nanny state. We will do preparations on their behalf because we don't expect them to be able to do better. It's certainly an elitist thought process, even if it feels true. No, we know it's true because of the levels. The system of levels, classes, and skills in this world legitimizes feudal behaviors and elitist behaviors. Quantified value, especially so at a later stage. We feel legitimized to act on their behalf because levels and our power tells us for a fact that we can do things they cannot. So coming back to the topic, should I let the general populace know? No. I realized Mila may be morally right, but I will not let the world know. Not with what we need to do. Not with what's at stake. If this is a sin, so be it. I accept it. The heroes gathered to discuss the coming battle. Their attempts at diplomacy failed. Time was running out, and there was only a few months left to the next year. Even if they agreed to evacuate, it would be an incomplete one. Let's force the dwarves out. Adrian said. They cannot behave like this, not when a demon king's going to land on their heads. Ken panicked. Please, don't do something hasty. I don't think it's hasty. Adrian, the native mountain world hero, insisted. Our power was granted to us, our class, to defeat demons. We are just getting collateral damage out of the way. Collateral damage. Ken repeated, and he felt his body ache. Age wore him down, even if he was augmented in many ways. The hero class effects are well documented. We know they behave like this when the demons are involved. Adrian, let's think for a moment. We have been thinking since we knew about it. If the damned dwarves don't want to move, then we'll have to move them. Use some earth magic and move the entire city if we have to. Adrian said. Wait, you mean like Superman? Ken interjected, realizing that Adrian might have a point. Well, yeah, like Superman. Adrian answered. Ken paused. It might work. If the reason why the dwarves resist the whole issue is because of the old buildings and history, moving it and relocating it elsewhere. Actually, that might work. Prabhu said. We could try and move the city, a bit. Why didn't we think of this shit? Chung complained. That was superhero tier stuff, moving entire cities. There was a long moment before the answer everyone hated. It was Colette who sighed. Because we've gotten lazy. We've been relying on Eon and the Valthorns to solve all these kinds of problems. Hafiz, the defender hero, turned to face her and tapped her on the shoulder reassuringly. Colette looked back and smiled. It'll be fine. We'll just have to solve this with what limited time we have. Yeah, we'll deal with our laziness later. Let's think about this strategy. Hafiz shrugged and looked back at Ken. We have to move them quite far for it to work. Colette thought about it, and then briefly carried Rihanna and placed her child on her lap. It's a huge city, and we're dealing with the Demon King. We need to move it quite far. A small distance won't be enough to avoid the collateral damage. Ken nodded. Chung frowned. We'll have to be selective with what we save and get the rest to leave. Has Eon announced the details? Mostly. The Valthorns began to spread news of the Demon King's projected arrival on the capital. The Demon King's detonation was usually enough to annihilate a small region. They'd have to move the city quite far just to be safe, which meant this was a far, far larger act. If they resist, the cost of magic would just increase. If they had a focused Earth Archmage instead of a general all-rounder like Prabhu and Colette, it would be possible with the amount of star mana they have. Prabhu did the calculations and quickly concluded the strategy. It's possible, but we'll need a lot of time. We're pretty much forcefully evicting the dwarven nation to another part of their country. We don't have enough time. Ken answered. Better than destroying everything. We won't be able to save everything, Prabhu concluded. It doesn't matter, I guess. I think we should do it. Ken stared at his friends. He looked so much older than the rest and seemed like the grandpa among the young adults. Forcefully moving the city could be a recipe for disaster. Do we have enough time? Prabhu hesitated. Let's just move what the dwarves care about. I think we can come to a compromise. If we agree to move it back after the war. How many times do I have to throw all these perfectly good mugs of beer your way, until you understand that we are not moving? The dwarven king stubbornly insisted. But, as it turned out, the dwarven council was a lot more level-headed and understood that the hero's solution of teleporting ancient parts of the city was the best compromise they'll ever get. They stood by the king when there was no good option because they couldn't abandon the ancient structures their ancestors blessed and built for them. This was their heritage, and they might as well die with it. But moving the entire structure via hero's magic was different. The Council of Dwarven Elders, in a strange moment of conflict with their king, stood and agreed. The dwarven king stared murderously at his council, but the dwarven society did not grant their king absolute power. There had been too many drunken berserkers and rampages by past kings for them to do so. The heroes got to work. They wouldn't be able to move everything. But they would be able to preserve some of the old structures and ancient buildings. Each building needed 3-4 days. Of the heroes, only Prabhu and Colette could move the cities. The rest of them were not mages, so they couldn't help much. Ancient buildings, so they had to be careful. And because there were only 2, the amount of structures they could save was limited. History, which the dwarves actually respect and do a pretty good job of safekeeping. It was incredibly taxing to move the city just 50 miles from its original location. The Void Mages triple-checked all the computations, and reaffirmed the location of the Demon King's arrival. The dwarves themselves were split into 2 groups. Those that resisted the hero's idea, and tried their best to stay put, and those that worked with the heroes. I could see this decision taxed them. Forced to act without the natives' approval pit the hero class own internal rules against each other. The dwarves were not happy about it. Some cursed the heroes, accusing them of bringing calamity to the city. Some of the dwarves tried to sabotage Prabhu's attempts to move the ancient relics. There were accusations that the heroes cared more for the powerful than the normal people. After all, they only saved the historical structures owned by the powerful. For the weak, all they could do was run, and lose all they had built. The heroes tried to ignore the naysayers, ignore the negativity. The heroes were designed to fight demons. Defeat the Demon King. The class, to a much lesser extent, asked them to protect locals. This was a much weaker mental compulsion. Each hero was subtly told not to do too much harm. The gods didn't mean for the heroes to cause the world's death. They were meant to be medicine, not poison that killed both the disease and the patient. The hero's idea of moving the city away made me ask the same question. Could we move our world out of the way? I tried to reach out to the will of the world of Treehome, and felt it rouse from slumber. I sent it my message, and all I got was no. Rejection. The world wouldn't move to preserve itself. Instead, it responded with acceptance. I didn't get it. They curse the demons, and yet when the demons come their way, they do not act to preserve themselves. Why? Stella had a theory, of course, that the act of deliberately moving through the void sea is an energy-consuming process. The sole data point is Comet World. Moving through space consumes the core's energies, and thus, causes the world to collapse. This is because in this world, the core and its suns appear to be a package. Each world doesn't exist beyond its immediate solar system. Far away stars that we see they don't exist, or are perhaps reflections from the edges of the void sea. The world's constellations are artificial. Magic. We also have not seen twin worlds. Worlds where there is more than one habited world. This leads to the idea that each realm we visit is centered around the planet. The sun thus exists as an extension of the planet, not the other way round. Even the sun rings had a single once habitable planet. Void magic also guides itself to the planet, and not the sun as its center. If people need to spend mana to travel through the void sea, it is therefore logical to assume that worlds and realms spend mana to move through the void sea. Comet World now moves entirely on pure momentum. But even so, looking back to that movement, or the speed of that movement, it is not hard to suspect that its movement is likely detrimental to the core and the sun. That was why it eventually collapsed, leaving the tiny bubble of darkness. It's even possible that if I withdrew my clone, the realm would collapse forever, never to be seen ever again. Moving either spends energy or accelerates the decay of a core's energy. It's possible that each of these worlds or realms maintains a barrier or bubble of reality, and movement in the void sea erodes this bubble of space. This resistance in the void sea is what causes realms to stay clustered together with their astral partners. Moving quickly through the void sea results in a realm spending more energy to maintain that barrier, more than what it produces, resulting in these worlds losing its ability to hold its realm together, and thus triggering a collapse. Their sun or suns would vanish. Again, this entire theory hinged on one sample size, i.e., Comet World. We do not know for certain whether moving quickly through the void sea has any such implications. It's also hard to test empirically because we are unable to view the world's respective moments in the void sea through all frames of reference. How does this even relate to the demon's comet? Because we wanted to know how it moves, and why worlds are reluctant to move. It was getting closer each day. If I took will of the world long ago, that domain choice clearly led to the ability to move the world. Did that set of abilities come without the usual costs of moving worlds? Is there a price to pay normally? How are the demons doing it? I wanted to know. Because moving worlds seemed like the best way of attacking the demon sun on our terms. On an interplanetary scale, demons were pretty much cancer. Mutant cancer that hijacked each world to self-replicate. Moving through the void sea was how this cancer spread to different regions. Why are the worlds not defending themselves? Why are they not moving out of the way? What loophole were the demons abusing? No. The fact that the world refuses to move out of the way merely makes me ask the question that everyone didn't want to ask. Are demons a deliberate design feature of the system? Because if I wanted to end the demons by destroying the demon sun, in the event we actually succeeded, how do we know it's permanent? This would lead to the question, how did the demons come about in the first place? Are they creations of the system itself? If so, destroying the demon sun merely bought time, and eventually the system will create new demons to replace the old ones. My hope is that the demons are quirks, bugs, or a virus. Not a feature of the system. A haphazard but persistent anomaly that has somehow found itself as a regular occurrence in the landscape of the multiverse, countered by injected medicine, heroes. Because there is no happy ending any other way. 250. Trimming twines. Year 253. The arrival of the Demon King of Spiderworld and the moment when the demon's comet came within our range were no more than weeks apart. First, was the Demon King of the Spiderworld. The dwarven city was cut up into pieces, and some of the old relics and ancient structures moved away. I was quite surprised at myself for not thinking about moving the city away. It only reminded me of how my approach to problems can still be influenced by my old realities, instead of my new ones. Most of the population of the dwarven capital sensibly moved away at the advice of the heroes. Only the dwarven king's loyalists made a fuss. I am not moving the dwarven resistance, the last of them, complained as Prabhu looked visibly annoyed. The heroes, from what I observed, tried to minimize their dealings with the locals. Disagreements and politics with the natives grated them. Even those who set up their own little fiefdoms, like Hafiz, Adrian and Kelly, employed well-paid managers to handle the nitty-gritty stuff that they disliked. It's a good deal for their managers because they were often paid in hero items, which granted them exceptional financial returns and often, a good deal of levels too. Even within the Valthorns, there were those who focused and built a career out of dealing with the heroes. Similar roles exist within the temples, too. Friction, due to cultural differences and the huge chasms in their mindsets. Prabhu sighed, and a magical bubble emerged around the segment, along with everyone in it. Frustrated, he just vented and the dwarves cowered. Look, I am doing this to keep you guys safe. And a flicker later, the entire bubble floated into the sky. Most parts of the dwarven city were now empty, houses that could be rebuilt at a later date. I volunteered to pay for my builders and contractors to participate in the reconstruction, since it was a good opportunity for them to gain levels. Prabhu levitated the entire bubble the whole way. But there were those that remained. They were first to die. On the demon spider world, a small group of my Valthorns kept watch of the pits. They would warn the heroes that the demon was on their way, and we planted our magical sensors there, to keep watch of the fluctuations in the core. It should give the heroes a day or two of advance warning, before the Demon King was on the way. for us to give the insane dwarves a last warning. Tell them that this is their final chance to keep their lives. But dwarven stubbornness was well known. The magical readings began to go nuts, and we all knew it was time. The dwarven resistance last year already cost us a tremendous amount of time, and the preparations to set up the magical bombs and traps were not as robust as we'd like them to be. The dwarves didn't like the idea of trapping what remained of their kingdom's city, even if it was mostly abandoned, and they protested the plans despite it. Some of the dwarves were logical, and they saw the logic in our plans. Another portion were the preservationists, who protested everything that tainted their ancient history. Fools. The star path glowed in the same manner as before, and we felt the demon king arrive on the mountain world. We waited for 2 weeks, and annoyingly, the dwarves didn't believe us. Then, the demon king was here. The rift ripped the sky above the dwarven capital apart as if the bluish sky was a piece of cloth, its threads came undone from the center. What came out of the blackness were 2 gigantic legs, each of them smashed into the grounds of the dwarven capital and left a small crater. Those who stayed died in that single instant. What a waste. Hold. The Valthorn commanders yelled. It was not yet time to set the bombs off. The heroes tensed, their magics ready to go. Alka stood next to the heroes and waited. He was a dwarf and high-speed movement wasn't his thing. He only had 1 shot to use his ability. 2 more legs emerged. Should we just blow up the legs? Kefri asked the question as they pinged the Valthorn commander. Alka looked uncertain, trying to figure out what was for the right time. Unlike the heroes, my dwarven mad scientist was not a war genius. His sense of timing was average at best. The bombs should be used on the main body, Prabhu repeated. Don't waste our debuff. How many legs do you think it has? Chung wondered as the 5th leg emerged. 8. It's a demon king, it could have as many as it wants, Colette said as she rolled her eyes. Her child was safely handled by a group of caretakers back on Treehome, an entire world away. Come on, let's get this over with. Hafiz, the defender hero, tapped the 2 archmages on their shoulders. Yeah, let's get this over with. Shouldn't be that hard to squash a giant spider, and get both of you back to your kid. Colette smiled at her fellow hero. We'd like that a lot. We felt a pulse of magic that came from the rift and we all knew it was time. Demon King Rach arrived. Gigantic spider jaws emerged from the rifts, and those multiple mouths released gigantic magical webs that spread out in every direction. I was fairly sure that was anatomically incorrect, but I guess the demons don't care. From the jaws of the Demon King, in a single explosion of sticky threads and webs, the entire dwarven city, what's left of it, was now covered in webs. Then it rained spiders. From the rifts. From the webs itself. Bombs. The Valthorns yelled and scrambled to activate the bombs. Before our eyes, the Demon King's legs seemingly vanished, and all my Valthorns felt panic. Was that a Demon King's aura? I felt it brush against my own, and I wasn't sure why we were panicking. We've done this many times. But my slightly less experienced forces, for some of them, this was their first encounter with the Demon King. My forces ignited whatever bombs we managed to install. We worked overtime. The explosions detonated in a burst of light that could be felt miles away. Star mana bombs made by the heroes and my Valthorns vaporized the smaller demonic spiders, but the Demon King spider was still invisible. Then, through my subsidiary trees, I felt the pressure from a high-speed thrust. Kefri was first to react, and she pushed the rest of the heroes out of the way, and dodged the thrusts of the Demon King's attacks. Switch to other forms of vision. It's only invisible to normal sight. Chung then roared, his eyes glowing with a ranger's special vision. I swapped to spiritual vision and saw the Demon King clearly. I saw the physical outline of the Demon King in my spirit vision, along with its partly charred body in the form of jagged outlines. The creature was a gigantic 10-legged monstrosity, a part of its body already burnt from the attack, and of its original 10 legs, 3 were already partially destroyed, leaving just a stump. It was regenerating, but fairly slowly. The Demon King's legs were its principal offensive weapon, each thrust was quick and came at unusual angles. Valthorns, retreat. The commander yelled as more spiders emerged from the rift, and annoyingly, they were invisible as well. Not all of my Valthorns have the ability to use spirit sight, though some of the archers have heat sight or magic sight. Without the ability to see our opponents, we would be sending Valthorns to their deaths, so we ordered them to retreat. At this point, our contribution would be to support from afar. Alka looked with uncertainty, the chaos of war still unnerved him. He may be a domain holder, but not all of them were suited for war. Wait, I told him. There will be an opportunity. Bombardment turrets and stations from further away blanketed the area. They didn't deal much damage against the Demon King, but helped clear the battlefield of the mobs. Alka waited, and I could sense his restlessness. For now, it was up to the 7 heroes. The dwarves watched the battle from afar, horrified. The Dwarven King himself looked pale, as the council of elders that vetoed his decision found themselves validated. Some of my Valthorns were nearby to provide support and deal with the demonic rifts. The demon spiders were everywhere. Similar to past Demon Kings, demonic rifts experience a surge in activity whenever the Demon King descends. Nations throughout Mountainworld battled the demon spiders and their champions, and it was a great relief that the invisibility effect granted by the Demon King did not extend to those outside its massive wall of webs. We would likely face far higher fatality rates if we had to deal with invisible spiders all over Mountainworld. The dwarven capital turned into a field of craters, as each of the Spider King's stabs and thrusts left massive craters in the ground. I decided to give the heroes some backup, as the volley of magic attacks dwindled. My horde of beetles and spider assassins joined the fray, to distract the demonic spiders and take some heat off the 7 heroes. I spawned multiple giant attendant trees throughout the battlefield to help amplify my skills and spawn my army of spiders and beetles. I thought it was interesting to have my spiders fight against demon spiders. But that was a mistake. The demon spider ejected a blast of goop that smashed into my beetles. I instantly felt my connection to the beetle snap, and then we witnessed the beetle explode and release more spiders. I cursed, and so did everyone else. The demon spider's goop blasts could possess other creatures and turn them into spawning pools. That meant I was just giving the Demon King more flesh and hosts. Even my giant trees were more trouble than help, since the trees acted as anchors for the spider's web, extending the range of the invisibility. Eon, pull back your giant trees and just focus on cutting away the webs. Chung roared as he sent out flying arrows that slashed through the webs. The webs were surprisingly magically resistant, and so had to be cut through plain OL physical force. Then the Demon King pulled out another trick. The Demon King vanished again. This time, it was even invisible in my spiritual vision. But, it could still be sensed through movement, through its heat signature and its magical pulse. Kefri, of all the 7 heroes, had the easiest time with this Demon King. She was innately attuned to the shifting movements in the earth as if she could feel every single vibration on the strands of web, every single shift in the dirt. The web, ironically, just made Kefra's senses better. As a part scorpionoid, she was exceptionally resistant to poisons, and she survived a hit from the demon spider's poison head-on with very little damage. She was more physically attuned, and coupled with her wide range of senses, she was the only one able to consistently approach the Demon King's vanishing body and land hits. The rest, except for Adrian and Chung, couldn't adapt to the demon spider's changing invisibility as quickly. Adrian, as a monk hero, also had his own set of invisibility detection, but it wasn't in the same tier as the scorpionoid. Chung's archer skills, luckily, came with some detection abilities. The webs grew, and that expanded the Demon King's hiding spots. The battle now turned into a game of hide and seek and endurance. The heroes needed to constantly figure out where the Demon King moved, while trying to cut down its range of movements by destroying its massive wall of web. The massive web network repaired itself constantly. The Demon King itself would intermittently release blasts that expanded the web network. It was supported by the demon champions. Those champions were also able to grow the web network, though at a slower rate. The Demon Spider King weakened from the initial blasts and repeated attacks, even after its regeneration. The massive size meant it relied on its invisibility and web network to maintain an edge. The webs also slowed the heroes, and would occasionally catch them in its web. My artificial minds were able to conclude that the Demon King's raw abilities were fairly average, but the variable invisibility was really quite effective against the heroes. Without the invisibility, and in its already weakened state, the Demon King would struggle to hold its ground. What more counterattack so effectively? Therefore, removing the webs, the key to its invisibility and battlefield control seemed key. I recalled the heroes faced an invisible Demon King once. Harris died to an assassin Demon King that seemed to be able to turn invisible at will, and didn't rely on webs as a gimmick. It's a good thing Demon Kings never have the combined skill sets of all the Demon Kings. There likely is a finite amount of abilities that they can sustain at the same time. Since my trees and my beetles didn't help, I diverted to use my spiders, beetles and roots to cut off the webs or pull them underground, while the Valthorns continued to attack only with long-range volleys. We exhausted most of our supply of magical bombs, so they had to use them sparingly on the higher value targets. The two archmages' area attacks were incredibly helpful in clearing the field of the smaller spiders. Without their magical infernos and energy explosions destroying most of the lesser spider spawns, the melee and mid-ranged focused heroes, Kefri, Hafiz, Adrian and Kelly wouldn't be able to focus on tracking the invisible Demon King. But really, of these four heroes, only Kefri was landing hits consistently. The rest were playing a guessing game half the time, and by the time they figured out where the Demon King was, it would have moved. Even sticking close to Kefri and attacking where she attacked wasn't that great, because they couldn't see the attacks from the Demon King, which just put them in danger. This isn't the right strategy. Hafiz, Kelly, both of you pull back and just focus on taking out the spider's webs and the laser mobs. Once we remove the invisibility, Chung and the mages can blow it up. Kefri said. Kelly, a knight barbarian, Hafiz was a defense-focused fighter, and this wasn't the right matchup for the two. The two melee heroes split up and went on a cutting spree. The three ranged heroes tried to keep their distance, and coated the battlefield with area of attack spells. These attacks hurt the Demon King slightly, but nothing like focused attacks. I didn't hate spiders. But I do now. Chung cursed. The spiders moved really quickly, but somehow only where there were webs. His shots kept missing, then he saw a pattern. Hafiz, Kelly, clear the webs strategically. We can selectively use the webbed areas to funnel the Demon King into a narrow space where we can attack. The Demon King only sticks to the webbed areas to maintain invisibility. I looked around the battlefield, trying to align my root strikes and attacks with the heroes. The dwarven city was transformed into a field of craters. There was not a single pristine building left. I focused my strikes on cutting down more webs. Cutting down webs is probably the best way to contribute, as my attacks hardly hurt the Demon King. The heroes still had to repeatedly dodge the Demon King's attacks, but with both Hafiz and Kelly focused on clearing the webs, the area with webs available to mask the demon spider's presence quickly diminished, and the spider Demon King's range of movement shrunk. Slowly, the tide shifted. They were hitting it more often, and harder, and I already felt the pulsing from the Demon King. Weakness. It's weakening. Be prepared for any last-minute oddities. I warned the heroes. The demon's attacks grew more relentless, at times, flailing with its multiple legs repeatedly. Yet it was getting slower. The attacks were not as fast. The thrusts didn't hurt as hard. The spider Demon King took 3 more hits from Kefri, and then that pulse strengthened. The heroes recoiled. They were now familiar with that sensation, and all 7 of them jumped backwards. The Demon King reached his limit. Alka, now's a good time to blow it up before it blows us up. Chung shouted at the top of his lungs while he moved back at the highest speed he could. Alka nodded, downed a speed-enhancing potion, and zoomed towards the mass of webs where the Demon King hid. He zoomed right to the center, and then immediately activated his detonation ability. Thanks to multiple parties clearing the webs, there was only a small area where it could hide. An explosion ripped through the remains of the capital, and melted what was the outer layer of the Demon King. The Demon King managed to deliver an attack right when Alka was about to explode. It stabbed Alka and cut off his arm. He screamed, and I recalled my explosive scientist back home for treatment immediately. His wound was tainted by a demonic curse-filled strike, not unlike what the demons did to the first few heroes I encountered. An earlier version of myself would not be able to fix it, but even so, Alka still needed at least a week of recuperation. Asterisk. The explosion triggered the next transformation of the Demon King, and each of the legs cracked open. It had 4 legs left, the rest chopped off through the earlier fights. Its main body melted and then turned into dust. From those 4 legs, 4 significantly smaller demonic spiders emerged. Each of them is weaker but so much smaller and faster. They were also no longer invisible. The 4 split up, and these smaller spiders all had spear-like legs. To call them spiders was probably incorrect. They were like human-sized sea urchins that levitated and rolled. Kefri managed to intercept the one and landed a hit. It stopped in its tracks, and turned to face the scorpionoid head-on. The second one fought with Adrian and Kelly and momentarily was on par with the 2. The third one charged at Chung, and he managed to impale the smaller spider with magical arrows before it got close. It didn't die, even after all the attacks. The fourth one headed right at Colette and Prabhu. They blasted it with magic, but the demonic spider shrugged it off. These spiders were magically resistant. Prabhu took out a staff made of my enchanted wood and smashed it into the spider. At that moment, I detected that familiar pulse again. It came from within the 4 spider urchins and spoke to the heroes. Get some distance from the spiders. They are suicide bombers. My roots emerged from the ground and tried to grab hold of these spider urchins and hold them in place. I didn't want the spider to chase after the heroes. My roots managed to catch 3 of them, and my roots immediately got to work and tried to drain the energy out. The 4th one dodged my roots, and went straight for Prabhu. No, you don't. Hafiz, the defense-oriented knight, slammed into the self-destructing spider, allowing both Prabhu and Colette to flee. My roots emerged as well and tried to protect Hafiz, while simultaneously trying to grab the 4th spider. The 4 spiders exploded. The earlier 3 spiders detonated weakly, their explosions didn't harm anyone. But the 4th one, pinned down by Hafiz, stabbed one of its spears in Hafiz's arm, and exploded right in front of the knight. The defender hero was encased in his own protections, but that was no use. Not at this range. Not with a gap in his protection. The heroes watched in absolute horror, and I heard their voices yell out in fear. But their screams were for naught. Hafiz was burned alive in the demonic explosion. Black flames encased his body. Demon King Rach has been defeated. Hafiz has died. You received 1 fragment. You have 97 fragments. You gained 1 level. You are now level 241. I checked on the rest of the heroes, but at that moment, I felt something strange coming from Colette. She looked upset, as she stood in the aftermath. The rest of the heroes were upset and cried too, but Colette's spiritual reaction was unlike anything I've seen. She didn't approach Hafiz's burnt corpse for hours, even though the lingering demonic flames couldn't really harm her. The body was charred black from the flames. His hero items were black and would disintegrate at a single touch. But my senses were locked on the hero. This wasn't sorrow. It came from her soul, and I felt as if she was a person torn in 2. Prabhu walked and placed his hand on her shoulder. She buried her face in his chest and cried. But the crying did not remove that constant sensation she emitted. I allowed them some time to grieve. They watched as Hafiz's body turned into ash and dust, blown away by the wind and leaving nothing behind. I waited, while my consciousness shifted to Alka. He was stable. Injured, but stable. He had to nurse his injuries from the demonic curse, and I would need some time to regenerate his arm. I checked back on the heroes. They muttered curses, some said a prayer. It felt like they were ready to talk again. All of you, please come to my biolab for healing and detailed checkup. I just want to make sure everything's fine because I detected something unusual. I asked, as I still sensed the unusual sensation from Colette. Ken panicked. What happened? I am not sure. I'd like to check everyone just to be sure. The former hero paused. I want to be there. The heroes returned to Branchhold and straight to my clone body. Ken, along with many others, were there to receive the heroes. Chung walked to Ken, and then stabbed his finger in his chest. You could have stopped this. Ken stared at Chung, unsure what he's talking about. What? You selfish bastard. You chose to give up your hero class, and here we are now. With 1 less. He would have lived if you were. Ken glared at Chung. I couldn't believe how Chung came to such a conclusion. Stop, Chung. You know this is bullshit. You don't get to blame Hafiz's death on something I did so many years ago. Chung wanted to say something, but Colette stopped him. Chung's right. Ken's eyes turned to face Colette. You should have told all of us to give up our hero class. Chung stared at Colette. That's not. Ken's right, too. This hero class is a poisoned chalice. We've known since we touched the journal. Let's go. Eon awaits us. Colette said firmly, and she walked ahead of the other heroes. I felt such a strong sensation in her soul that I really wanted to know what happened. Chung turned to face her partner. Prabhu. What happened to her? Prabhu sighed. Someone died. Read the room, Chung. Whatever you want to tell Ken, now is not the time. What? It's me, now. Prabhu ignored the archer and walked past him. Kefri tapped Chung on the shoulder. I agree with Prabhu. Just give it up for today. What? Chung protested. We could have used more hands. Not today. Kefri repeated, and ignored her pursuer. Ken watched the exchange, and sighed. He couldn't help it. He walked to somewhere quiet and watched the heroes head to the biolabs. He sighed as Snek sat next to him. Eon, where did we all go wrong? Should we use the hero class we've been holding? Snek wanted to keep it for Eulera, but I sensed he was also having second thoughts as well.